Robert is only a sick little boy, she thought. Lord Nestor is a man grown, stern and suspicious. Robert was not strong and had to be protected, even from the truth.
Some lies are love,
Peter had assured her. She reminded him of that. When we lied to Lord Robert, that was just to spare him, she said.
And this lie may spare us, else you and I must leave the Eyrie by the same door Lysa used.
Peter picked up his quill again.
We shall serve him lies in Arbor Gold, and he'll drink them down and ask for more. I promise you.
He is serving me lies as well, Sansa realized. They were comforting lies, though, and she thought them kindly meant. A lie is not so bad if it's kindly meant, if only she believed them.
Welcome and hello to History of Westeros podcast. That was an awkward intro. The quote was good, but me here, I'm as awkward as usual. With me is Ashaya, and welcome, Chloe of Girls Gone Canon / Drunk, A Song of Ice and Fire History. It is awesome to have you back for such a fun topic.
Thank you so much for having me. I really don't know if maybe I'm typecast, this is just, Radio Westeros had me and Haley from Drinking Podcast Brooklyn on, and I'm just like,
Well, in this case, your name is Lies in Arbor, so how can we not have you on the Lies in Arbor Gold stream? I mean,
I'd be offended if you asked someone else before me, necessarily. I don't know. No, I'm happy to be back. Thank you so much again for having me back.
What have you been doing lately over with Girls Gone Canon and any other projects you want to shout out?
God, with my life. Just today during work, I completed a project where I charted 29 mentions of Arbor wine throughout the main series. I put that in a spreadsheet. There's a link you guys can play with if you want. It was fun for me. I'm never going to go in that doc again. Quarantine's great is what I'm saying. Now, we just finished Jamie. So at Girls Gone Canon, if you aren't familiar, please come check us out if you're looking for a new podcast to love in your little lineup. We would be so humbled for that. We just finished doing Jamie. We do point of view chapters, one point of view chapter at a time. So we just did Jamie's chapters from the very first till his last in Dance. It was very emotional 2-part. And I know that your Valar Rereadus's, we've had a little lap over here and there, which has been really fun with Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do. Second the recommendation for Girls Gone Canon. I am a listener myself, and y'all do some great work over there. It's a great way to approach the material, doing each POV one at a time, because you can really get immersed in it. It's a different way to approach a character, and we love these characters so much, so being really focused on one character is, because of the scope of George's work, that's a lot. Even one character is a lot, so it's really good.
Yeah. We do lightning rounds in between, which kind of break it up. We get to summarize kind of what happened in the last handful of chapters from chapter to chapter. You can have like 8 chapters between them. You can have 1 chapter between. Sometimes it's a little easier of a refresh. Sometimes we have to go back and read a couple chapters and bring some stuff out for our research. So we're doing that. Ares Oakheart is our next POV, but that's 1 chapter, you might say. Yes, it is. It's 1 week.
Stretch.
Yes, moms need a vacation, so we're going to come back with a new point of view. So tune in this Friday to our new episode, and you'll hear who the new point of view is.
Oh, I was about to ask, but if it's a surprise, then we'll have to wait.
Maybe I'll tell you guys. We'll see. See. Off the record.
Right on. And you guys are doing His Dark Material. His Dark Zolorak Materials.
Yes, His Dark Materials has been going really well. We are finishing the 2nd book in the original trilogy. We've covered some of the side material on our Patreon at patreon.com/girlsgonecanon, where right now we're doing one of the Books of Dust, which is kind of a prequel sequel series, but not. Philip Pullman says, no, it's
Oh.
not, but it is. So it is, I'm going to tell you. And that's been fun, though. So we're covering La Belle Sauvage, the first book that's kind of almost a prequel of that. And so check that out if you want, if you're into his dark materials. I did not read it growing up. Eliana, my co-host, did. So she got me kind of to fall in love with it. And now I've read everything there is that I can get my hands on, and she's catching up. So that's fun.
Oh, wow. So you like passed her, huh?
Yeah. She surpassed the Maester in this for sure.
That's great. Well, you guys make a great team. I'm glad you're teaming up on a whole other fandom as well. That's really cool.
Yes.
So let's give a couple of quick shout outs. And it looks like we got a couple of friends sending super chats. Stan Rixian says, hello, beautiful friends. Thanks for doing this. Actually, it says for Neds, which I like. Hello, beautiful for Neds, because I think of Ned and a beautiful Ned. That's a compliment. Yes. Thank you, Stan Rixian. And be sure to check out Stan Rixian's art. All of you by now are familiar, at least with the name, but you may not have checked out her website, which if you haven't, you are in for a treat. And also we have a super chat from Stephiz. Thank you for keeping me sane. Well, I don't know that we deserve credit for keeping you sane, but we'll take it. And from Here Be Dragons, hey, thanks, Steven. He says, hit the like button. Well, we appreciate the double version of support, the financial and encouragement of liking. Steven, you're a great man. So let me thank some patrons real quick. We've got our good friend Jeff Gnarly, the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' First Sword, always leading the way. And we have a couple of Dragon Rider friends. We've got Talanis the Talon, King of Gagassos, Rider of Telarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black, showing off some new artwork, I think. And Hunter of House Black Cloud, the Storm Runner, King of the Sky, Rider of Heranicon, the Windworm, a dragon with scales of brilliant platinum silver, horns, claws, and fangs of pure white with eyes the color of diamonds. A fire. That sounds cool. Okay, so I encourage y'all to pour yourself a glass. I'm going to do this in front of the microphone so podcaster people can hear me.
Prove it.
Yeah, okay.
The real street cred.
Oh yeah, that's the sound. That's that sound.
It actually sounds amazing.
Cool. Yeah, unfortunately, this is not Arbor Gold because I can't afford Arbor Gold because it's really expensive, but also because it doesn't exist, but also because I only had red wine in the house, and it's happened to be Game of Thrones red wine, so I was like, well, either I can go out and buy white wine or I can use Game of Thrones red wine, and I was like, well, let's go with the one that allows me to stay home. So... oh, wow. Look, Sanrixian added a comment here that we must shout out. She says discount code for her store is HOW for History of Westeros and Girls for Girls Gone Canon. So all the more reason to visit there either right now or right after the stream or ASAP.
My household recently adopted the Stannis shirt that she has and the Night's Watch shirt. I wear that one with pride. I almost wore the Night's Watch shirt today, but I went for a more reach appeal.
The North Remembers is certainly my favorite of hers. I'm special. I feel special because I have one of the ones that she didn't repeat the color on, so I feel special whenever I wear it.
Yeah. I think we probably have some limited edition ones, all of us, if we pulled together.
I bet we do. Yeah, we probably have a nice combined collection if we were to go that route. So
socialize the shirt.
Yeah. So announcements real quick, just two. We no longer have the quote unquote worry of Valar Rereadus being unfinished when Winds of Winter is announced. So that, my friends, is a good reason to take our first official drink of the episode. So we will be doing Dunk and Egg as part of the Readus. That is what we're going to add on to the end of it, and it's going to be a great way to bring Sean back into the fold. Sean yeah, right? Isn't that cool? He hasn't been around in a while. He's been adjusting to life in Colorado. He moved up there and got married to Rita of the Coppermane. Hey, Rita. And they're doing great up there, but of course, like everyone, their life has been interrupted by the real world. And it would be cool for Sean to get back on the podcast. So that is the plan. But without any further ado, let's get into Lies in Arbor Gold. I would say, I suppose it's fair to say, it's a bit of a verbal motif, leitmotif, a sense, but it's a little unusual in that it's an object. I thought about it, and I couldn't think of anything but one other example where you have a thematic pattern that recurs. There's a lot of those in A Song of Ice and Fire, no doubt. But as far as an item that signifies something fairly specific. The only other one I could really think of was the blue rose indicating Lyanna. All the others are more like concepts or ideas or themes. Is there anything that anyone else could think of? I wonder if commenters or Chloe or Shay, if you had one that I missed.
The closest thing would be an audible, right? Would be like the bells, the ringing of the bells, or the tick that like John flexing his hand is another one that's kind of similar. That tick, that kind of traumatic tick.
That's a good idea. Yeah, the tick. I didn't even think of that one as a potential category. That's a really good one. I was trying to think of things like maybe one thing we pay a lot of attention to in our reread is the mantras that a lot of characters seem to have, and like Brienne's is "I seek a maid of 3 and 10," you know, and and Jaime's is "Lancel and Moonboy and Osmond Kennelblack for all," you know.
Yeah.
But those are just constant reverberations within their head, and that's not necessarily a clue that something's going to happen. That's just something that's always with them. So that is a little unique about, like with the blue rose, if there's a blue rose present, you know that maybe Lyanna's ghost or the concept of Lyanna is hanging around. This one's a little more vague because deception is a lot broader than a specific person. But that is the idea with Lies in Arbor Gold. It's mostly associated with Sansa and Cersei. There's quite a few others it comes up with. It is the fanciest wine in the world, even in Slaver's Bay. The ultra rich atop their brick pyramids drink it. So it has brand power, but it also gets you drunk. Getting people drunk to make them more compliant is a theme as old as human existence, right? I mean, that's requires a little explanation. Alcohol is an ancient thing. People figured it out long ago. Same goes for bribery, right? Giving something of value to get what you want from somebody. Pretty simple. Or just getting them to not interfere. I'll bribe you when you look the other way. In literature and life, sweetness is associated with deception, and in Arbor Gold, the concepts are beautifully and wickedly combined. All the empowerment, the flattery, the seduction, the corruption. So, real quick for me, we're going to explain how we came into this topic, and then I'm going to ask Chloe the same. I was perusing Westeros.org back in the day, as was my wont, and I found a thread by a poster named Apple Martini, who is a frequent poster over there, well regarded, and it was a post she titled it, "Well, look what I found," and there was a bunch of clues about Lies in Arbor Gold, or about Arbor Gold the wine, and every time it's mentioned, there seems to be some sort of deception going on. And what's funny is I was rereading this thread a few weeks ago and discovered that I was like, is this the original thread that I was in, that I'd seen back then? I was like, nah, this must be a different one. And that was a brain fart, because by the time I got to page 2, I found several posts by me in this thread, and was like, oh, okay, so I have been in this thread. And so it all kind of came back to me, and I remembered trying to get an episode made back then in 2013. It just didn't happen. This was when History of Westeros was really new, and I didn't really have a approach for topics, but it seemed like a good idea. So here we are 7 years later. Now, Chloe, what about you? Your name is Lies in Arbor, so clearly this is something that stuck out to you, but please tell us your name origin story.
So, long time ago, this ruins all ASWAF nerd cred, you know, like I'm like, oh, this is the roots, but here we are, VH1 behind the podcast, right? So Lies in Arbor Gold, I don't remember where I read it first. I know it could have been on Reddit. It could have been someone, because let's be real, I used to do a lot of stand-up comedy, and it's parallel thought, right? Like, there's how many people, millions of people have bought these books. Mm-hmm. So like, thought's not as original as we think it is. You know, some of us feel like we sit on our high tower with our right theories all the time. I am one of those people, very right all the time. And it's not my fault. It's just how I am.
Here I am thinking I'm read threads that I've already been in. I mean, yeah.
Right. No, and that's the thing. It's parallel thought. So, I mean, I think a lot of theories, some of the best work in the community comes out of people putting ideas together, right? Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful synergy, magic. And I don't know where I read Lies in Arbor Gold first. I started off reading ASWAF and getting into Tumblr, the Sansa Tumblr community, mm-hmm. if you can believe it, folks. And I think I've come a long way. Thank you. I think I'm a much more fleshed out character myself now. But I think I just really love that theory, and I needed a new name. I think my name was like The Littlest Bird or something on Tumblr back then, and I needed a new name. And then I started writing meta and stuff, and it just stuck. And on Twitter, really old lore, if you and I have been following each other a long time, you might remember it used to be Lies in Arbor Gold with no D, because it's a 15-letter limit for Twitter
I
usernames.
do remember
So
that now
like
that you mention it. Yeah.
one letter away from Lies and Arbor Gold, and I just kept it that way for a while, and that's why I changed it to Lies and Arbor after a while, and I just streamlined it on almost everything.
Modernized.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the big story. I ruined everything. The illusion is shattered. Shattered.
Well, we're all the richer for your A Song of Ice and Fire education and glow up. So, and it's interesting too, folks. There's a little more meta before we get into the specific examples, because this is not something George had fully detailed early on. He definitely approached it with wine equals deception, but it was more of a vague thing, seemingly more vague. This may require a little more research, but the phrase Arbor Gold specifically doesn't come till A Storm of Swords, and then it starts popping up a lot. As you'll see throughout this episode, we've got a lot of associations with some of the biggest plot lines in all of the story, some of which are still quite unresolved. But it seems like George was getting started with this in a different way, and he sort of expanded the concept or maybe tightened it up. And for example, Arbor wine is referred to in more generic terms prior to A Storm of Swords, but seems to have some similar themes. For example, Chloe, you found a couple of very specific examples that would be appropriate to bring up here.
Yeah, it's really apparent that it wasn't a shtick when he started out per se, but I think George was utilizing it as a device, as in general a symbolic device, right? Like Arbor Red was very popular in a Game of Thrones and in Clash of Kings, much more popular than later on. If you kind of pay attention, I feel like Arbor Red is not drunk as much. But even as early as Eddard 10 in Game of Thrones, where Robert offers Ned the cup of vintage from the Arbor, it's not named if it's red or gold, but I think it still counts. I think one-upping the Lies and Arbor Gold theory to say wine has 1,080 mentions on its own in this series, and it seems to signify a political event. Its significance or importance is always tied to something, like Sansa and Joffrey on the Trident, or Daenerys' would-be assassination. In Eddard 10 in A Game of Thrones, Robert says, "Do you know what Catelyn's done in taking Tyrion?" And Ned immediately lies and says, "Everything she does at my command." Yet Robert just poured him a cup of gold, a cup of Arbor Gold. You know, I mean,
nice.
It's Arbor wine. We don't know. But I think it's symbolic. I think alcohol, when it's something that's a very strong, significant subject in the story, it seems kind of like it's I don't know, treachery, you know, some sort of deceit is at play.
Yeah, that is very true. I think you're right. It's not just Lies and Arbor Gold, but it is more of a theme associated with alcohol. But today we're going to focus mostly on the explicit mentions of Lies and Arbor because there's enough of them to fill an episode. But this is also a bit of maybe a lesson for all of us, not just y'all listening, but for us podcasters too. When you're rereading or hopefully reading a new book later, you can be on the lookout for this. It'll probably help you navigate some of the scenes and understand some of the subtext. You may even be well ahead of the game in some cases when you, especially if you see mentions of Arbor Gold in the Winds of Winter, you'll be ready. And at the end of the episode, we've got a few comparisons lined up, including a bit like on Shade of the Evening, which is kind of an opposite, but also a few cases where, like kind of like this one that Chloe just mentioned, where it's probably Arbor Gold, but not specifically mentioned. And there's going to be good reasons for why it's not called Arbor Gold. For example, in one case, we've got one with Dunk. Well, Dunk grew up at Flea Bottom. Why would he know what Arbor Gold tastes like? So it's part of it is a class thing, and that is relevant to the whole pastiche here of how the wealthy, a lot of times this is a toy for the wealthy, thus a corruption tool only for the wealthy. But occasionally, when offered to people of lower status, it has a lot of power as well. But we'll start with Sansa. She is perhaps the most important of the characters associated with Arbor Gold, and she presents sort of an opposite to Cersei, in which case, for example, that opening quote, Sansa was quite adamantly stating in her monologue there that she doesn't believe these sweet lies. If only I believed these lies. So Sansa is breaking free from that line of thinking, whereas Cersei is sort of leaning into it. So let's have a quote here. Is this one, can you read this one?
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I don't think I can read the quotes for any of these.
Okay, well, we can do
This is
it.
a lot. Okay.
Okay, is that cool with you, Chloe?
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool.
Do
Well,
you
I'll
still
do
want to
the.
be Littlefinger, or do you want
Yeah.
to be?
Well, I don't want to be Littlefinger, but I
No,
will.
he wants to. As he said before this recording, he wants to do Littlefinger.
Yeah, sorry, I misheard. You're correct. Aziz, I think you should still keep doing Littlefinger repeatedly. Maybe even a
All
little harder
right.
this time.
Okay, so sirs, I know you must be weary after your ascent. Rooms have been prepared for all of you to spend the night, and food and wine await you in the lower hall. Oswell, show them the way, and see that they have all they need. He turned to
Nestor Royce.
My lord, will you join me in the solar for a cup of wine? Elaine, sweetling, come pour for us.
A low fire burned in the solar where a flagon of wine awaited them. Arbor Gold. Sansa filled Lord Nestor's cup, whilst Peter prodded at the logs with an iron poker. Lord Nestor seated himself by the fire. "This will not be the end of it," he said to Peter, as if Sansa were not there. "My cousin means to question the singer himself."
That is from A Feast for Crows, Sansa 1. Notice Sansa 1, not Elaine 1. That would be her next chapter after that. So Sansa grasps all this fairly well, that she's being lied to, and that also that she's not interested in this. She's not interested in the comfort of pleasant lies. She was that. Certainly when Sansa was introduced to us, she was more so that description than anyone. Very much her head in the clouds, thinking about stories, riding in a wheelhouse with the shutters closed, not seeing the world, all that. But that is very much gone. Sansa now mocks, almost, well, maybe not mocks, but pities that style of thinking, kind of like with Marjorie's cousins when they're all, talking about all the knights they're going to marry and how bravely they're going to fight in the battle. And she's just like... And it reminds you of Catelyn with the Knights of Summer. She's very much following in her mother's footsteps. So we've basically described the outskirts of what lies in what Arbor Gold is as far as a wine, as far as a product. Obviously, it comes from the Arbor, and it's the best wine in the world, according to pretty much anyone. But in world, yes, as we've said, it's a variety of types of deception, whether it's flattery or bribery or assassination or and it's corruption too. You're telling someone you're worth it. You're saying, I'm a powerful friend, I can afford to serve you this wine, this expensive thing that is temporary, and etc. It's really neat. So you've got some old school notes here on mythology that I think is a super great way to start off here.
I think there's a lot of mythos involved with alcohol, right? Because if you look back in Norse mythology, Greek mythology, even reading things about Christianity, there's an importance of alcohol in almost every story or fable that's presented. There's Odin, considered god of alcohol. Of course, we know Odin, but mead was considered the drink of the gods, right? So anyone in Norse mythology who partook in the fermented or honeyed sweet juices was considered scholarly or a poet. It was always a necessary part of formalizing treaties, land deals, marriages, marking funerals, wills. We really see this best work with Sansa in A Feast for Crows. We shall serve him lies in Arbor Gold, and he'll drink them down and ask for more, I promise you. Both Sansa and Littlefinger are playing different parts here, right? Littlefinger has acquired the poison, which he uses to cover up his trail. The shine of it all is in distraction, because Arbor Gold, all that glitters is not Arbor Gold, right? It's the finest vintage, but look at Littlefinger. Not only did he exploit King's Landing when he was there for every single dragon he could get out of it and more, he's exploiting the Vale the same way now, and that is what is being hidden beneath the wine that he's granting his guest. Sansa, as you mentioned, she's not a little girl anymore, right? She's not locked up in Maegor's holdfast. She's smarter, she's freer in the Vale, and she's learning. She gets this thought, and it's kind of empathic, it's compassionate. She thinks, why did she feel like weeping? It was good that Nestor Royce was with them. Were they all lies? She asks. She's aware of what Peter's doing, but it's shrouded by the whimsical fancy of Arbor Gold, the flashy vintage. In a way, Peter making Sansa pour the Arbor Gold is once more tying her to him as an accomplice, just like what he did with Joffrey's death by having her framed and tied up in it. That was an Arbor Red, right? Which very close, but death, blood, metal. This is Arbor Gold. And to go back to mythology, Sansa's Persephone role, I think, is brought up a lot in the fandom, and people love to kind of peruse that, especially with the pomegranate being offered. much like the underworld and Littlefinger as Hades. But I don't see that Dionysus gets brought up in a more serious sense. I usually see him compared to Tyrion, right, as like the god of tits and wine. Yeah, but I think it actually could fit with Littlefinger a little bit. Dionysus is thought to have two forms. His ancient one had a long beard. Men in early times, of course, wore the long beards. The younger one was more youthful and effeminate and young with those two forms. And Peter is considered to have two forms, right, with Sansa. She thinks one is the warm father kind of figure that he's trying to act like, but the other one is creepy, manipulative, wants to hook up with me, skis bag, Littlefinger. And Dionysus was kind of the same way. And that's where Sansa has landed herself by Feast's End. She's in the clutches of a two-faced god who has control over means of production and wine and fertility of the lands. It's very interesting, very powerful.
Well said. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's really on point. It's true. There's a lot of Greek myth influence in general throughout the books because that's a big influence on our culture. But George is a fan of the myths. I like this take on Dionysus in particular because it's true. Like he's left off as kind of a joke, but it's true what you say. I've never thought about comparing him to Littlefinger, but that is a really good fit.
The beard.
Yeah, that little goatee, right? And so let's move on to a subsection of Sansa discussion here that is lies and Arbor taxes. This is a familiar form of deception. I think we're going to cover a lot of different types of deception throughout this episode, and this one is the shared delusion of the powerful. Here is another quote.
Highgarden reaped the richest harvest. Tyrion eyed Mace Tyrell's broad belly and thought, he has a prodigious appetite, this one. Tyrell demanded the lands and castles of Lord Alistair Florent, his own bannerman who'd had the singular ill judgment to back first Renly and then Stannis. Lord Tywin was pleased to oblige. Brightwater Keep and all its lands and incomes were granted to Lord Tyrell's second son, Sir Garland, transforming him into a great lord in the blink of an eye. His elder brother, of course, stood to inherit Highgarden itself. Lesser tracts were granted to Lord Rowan and set aside for Lord Tarley, Lady Oakhart, Lord Hightower, and other worthies not present. Lord Redwyne asked only for 30 years remission of the taxes that Littlefinger and his wine factors had levied on certain parts of the Arbor's finest vintages. When that was granted, he pronounced himself well satisfied and suggested that they send for a cask of Arbor Gold to toast good King Joffrey and his wise and benevolent hand. At that, Cersei lost patience. It's swords Joff needs, not toasts, she snapped. His realm is still plagued with would-be usurpers and self-styled kings.
But not for long, I think,
said Varys unctuously.
That is Tyrion 3, A Storm of Swords. So as you can see why that would be paired with Sansa, because this is around the time when they are spending much time together. So first of all, there's a lot of obvious lies that they all are agreeing to here, that they all have as I said at the beginning, a shared delusion. And it's in some cases it is a shared delusion. In some cases it's more of a party line where they all know it's not true, but they say it because it helps them maintain their power. For example, calling Joffrey good or Tywin benevolent is I literally wrote bah ha 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 in the document here. And only 30 years of no taxes. That's what it says. It says he asked only for 30 years remission of it. Can you imagine what your life would be like if you had 30 years remission of taxes? I mean, that is a lot of money.
I will drink to that. I'm just going to pour this for that.
In fact, I'm ready for a refill too on that account. Let's see here.
Did someone say taxes?
So among this group are several lords who are potentially friends in the Reach, meaning those potentially switching over to young Griff, Aegon VI, whatever your preferred nomenclature for that young fellow is. And of course, of all people, it's Varys who says, "Oh, don't worry, it's not for long. The wars will be over really soon." Says he who is planning to foist a whole new usurper on the kingdom very soon.
Very filming propaganda, just like, yes, the war is going to be over.
So yeah, that's pretty funny. Like that's one that you just can't possibly catch the first time. I mean, this is like the Fagon reveal doesn't come for quite some time. In fact, 2 full books. In fact, in real life, it was like 10 years later. So that's quite a big difference. Now, so there's just all this stuff like Lord Oakheart, Lord Hightower. Like, what did Lord Hightower do? Let's use him as an example. Rowan and Tarly, by the way, are examples of ones who were probably going to switch to Aegon's side. Oakheart, I'm not quite as sure about. Hightower, well, they might have their hands full with Euron, who, as I said, we'll touch on briefly at the end. But this is what Hightower did during the war. Sided with Renly, then didn't side with Stannis. And then so may have had some men with Tywin when they attacked the King's Landing. And this is he gets rewarded for this? Like, I feel like lots of people did more and were loyal from the beginning. This guy it's basically a bribe. It's like, thanks for changing sides for us. Here's your payoff. Is that kind of how you feel too, or something like that?
I think so. And I'd even go as far to say, like, the Hightowers historically were awful. A. B. Supported the Greens, right?
Right.
And look at them now. If that track record is anything similar, they supported Renly, who is basically the first Aegon II we meet in the story.
True that.
So I'm guessing the Hightowers are going to put what power they have left if they're not destroyed. That's the other thing. We're talking about Arbor Gold. In 30 years, maybe this podcast will be a vintage because Euron's going to destroy those arbors. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
The Reach is decimated. Can't wait to watch that happen.
You guys can't lie to each other anymore. The wine stops now.
How will politics go on? Maybe that's the end Game of Thrones, you guys.
It's nothing but brutal truths from here on out.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's definitely like you watch guys bang their way to the middle in these careers all of a sudden, right? During this scene, they just show up and they're like, "You farted the right direction. You now get all these traitors' castles."
That's right.
Me, I feel like giving you this box to live in.
Yep, that's pretty much it. So there's also a good example of this with Tyrion and Sansa more directly with each other when they're forced to marry. And, well, here is the lead-in quote.
For their wedding night, they had been granted the use of an airy bedchamber high in the Tower of the Hand. Tyrion kicked the door shut behind them.
There is a flagon of good Arbor Gold on the sideboard, Sansa. Will you be so kind as to pour me a cup?
Is that wise, my lord?
Well, no, it's not wise. This is a situation that stinks for both of them, although for very different reasons. It is awful for them both, but obviously Sansa is feeling a much different form of awful than Tyrion. And yeah, drinking's not going to help. It's something that facing sober might be better. However, at first they're both kind of set on, oh boy, this is going to stink. We may as well be drunk to get through it. And they do both drink. Even Sansa tries to gulp down some wine, and of course it doesn't help her feel better. It just makes her feel a little nauseous. And same with Tyrion, he doesn't feel better. He's been drinking all day, as is kind of common in A Storm of Swords. He's drunk half the time in that book. And no lies that either of them can tell. No wine, no lies. Nothing is going to make this okay. And that is kind of what they eventually come around to. And Tyrion's like, wait, we could not do this. And yeah, so what do you have to say about this scene, Chloe?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. I think this passage has even more reach.
Nice.
When you consider when you consider in Tyrion's last chapter, Tyrion 3, so it's like 8 chapters before Sansa 3. So that's why I think this goes really well with the chapter before and with the stuff we just talked about in Feast. We're seeing Arbor Gold brought up while doling out honors, right? So Arbor Gold is brought up while good King Joffrey's victories are being doled out with that Lord Redwyne asking for the 30 years remission of tax. I mean, this is you're trading wealth right now. That's what these men are at the table. They're trading wealth. Cersei snaps at this and she's like, Joffrey needs swords, not wine and toasts. He probably needs some good therapy, in my opinion. In comparing that and what happens in Tyrion 3, so the Reach, to break it down, offers aid to the Lannisters, which they need. We know that. Cue Cersei pushing them away, haha. The Reach has been significantly crippled in taxes that Littlefinger placed on their very productive economy, wine. The Reach gets one over on the Lannisters because the Lannisters are in need and they get some of that economic agency back in doing so. By the end of the ordeal, they offer to toast to their king that they support, quote unquote, with Arbor Gold to cover up that this was an entire political deal. This is just the pieces are moving. Tyrion then marries Sansa in this chapter, which is a heavy political deal. Similar, it could lead to further land, grants, and power for Team Lannister. Once more, the suggestion to cover up the lies that led to this power is brought up. For Sansa, her wedding to Tyrion isn't just both of them guzzling wine because they're in crappy situations, though. For Sansa, she is the political deal in Sansa 3. Tyrion 3 shows us that political deal in broad, bold terms with a tangible money and property focus. But when it comes to Sansa 3, it gets dismissed so easily because Sansa is that tangible capital. She says it herself in that chapter. Then she remembered what Dantos had told her in the Godswood. Tyrell or Lannister, it makes no matter. It's not me they want, only my claim.
There's our girl wising up for sure, no doubt. She nails it. I mean, that is 100% accurate, isn't it? But what does she do about it? That's another question. But she just has to learn and get better and not fall for this stuff anymore, and that is what's happening. And Littlefinger doesn't realize how smart she is, doesn't realize that she's breaking free of this line of thinking, and he thinks she's still right there, I think, but he's wrong. Yeah, this is really cool. Like the way this is all slid under the radar, and the way these like really, really powerful people swap vast sums of wealth on sometimes large things, but sometimes very small things, very minor matters. And these are staggering sums. It's hard for us even to fathom how much money and wealth comes from these lands, because some of these places we never visit, we never see them, and heck, we're not people that rule vast tracts of land. We don't have firsthand experience with this in the real world. Like, I don't know what it's like to own 1,000 acres of wine growing, of grape growing, like that's, I have no idea what kind of economics goes into that.
I think the word you're looking for is like vineyard.
Vineyard. Well, see, I'm having too much vineyard myself in a cup, and it's affecting my vocabulary. But yeah, you're right, though. That's true. That is what it's called. So I see Sanrixian comments that wine and blood are connected in Catholic Christian myth. That's very true. And George, of course, being raised Catholic, one would expect that's in his brain one way or another, conscious and subconsciously. Also, we have a super chat from Lord Commander Namian Darklin. Wish I could stay for the whole thing. Love all that you guys do on HOW and GGC. Keep up the good work. By far the best fandom in fiction. Cheers to you, Lord Commander Namian Darklin. Raise your glasses, folks. And from Low, Yatko Muir. I don't think I said her name right. Is that how you say her name? Do you know?
You said their name correctly, yeah.
Right. That is how they say. That is how. Yeah. Yes. My apologies. So, thanks for the brilliant content as always, they say, and a heart, and the heart comes right back to you. We are reciprocate that heart. We appreciate the shout out and the support. So let's move on to Cersei, since this scene had Cersei's complaints and that we focused on and discussed around. So at the first meeting of her new smallest council, we have this line. We have Dornish Red and Arbor Gold and a fine sweet Hippocras from Highgarden.
The gold, I think. I find Dornish wines as sour as the Dornish. As Merryweather filled her cup, Cersei said, I suppose we had as well begin with them.
On one hand, you can see why she would pick the Arbor Gold over the thing from Highgarden or the thing from Dorne, because she doesn't like either of those things. But really, the real symbology, I think, is that she is choosing to be lied to here. She is choosing to hear sweet words, and that is very much reflected in her Ares-style council of lickspittles and yes-men, people that tell her what she wants to hear, people who won't push her when she says, no, I don't want to hear that. Because one person who's telling her things that she doesn't want to hear is, say, Qyburn, and Qyburn just backs down every time. She's like, I don't want to hear that. He's like, okay. Pycelle may be a small exception, but Pycelle's one of the few people on that council that she had nothing to do with appointing, and she thinks quite often about getting rid of him because, he's not a yes man, even though he could be an ally. So this is a really interesting way to go. Would you agree with that, or do you have more to add to that basic assessment of Cersei's council?
No, I think she, one of her biggest flaws, she doesn't look at people as people, and Littlefinger outlines that. I'm sure it'll come up here, but Littlefinger outlines that to Sansa, that, some pawns have their own wills. Some of these pieces decide they want to move, and Cersei doesn't think that these pieces do. Well, what gets Cersei imprisoned? right, by the faith, because she doesn't think these pawns are going to do anything. And I think that's something even in this line that might be foreshadowing. I'll let you in on some writing stuff going on. I'm
Oh.
writing an essay. It'll come out someday. Mallory Sanrixian is my motivation because she's making some neat art for this essay. So if she finishes, then I have to finish, is what I told myself. It's hard.
All right, go Sanri then.
Right? Yeah, I know she's really carrying the torch for me right now. So go buy some of her art and her work because she deserves it. In this line that Cersei says, she says, I find Dornish wines as sour as the Dornish and chooses the gold. But in the Winds of Winter, I think that she's going to do quite the opposite. She's going to choose the Dornish because the Dornish are on their way to the capital, as we know, a different swill, right? Choosing a different swill for once because the Dornish are on their way to the capital, and pretty soon Arbor Gold's not going to keep working. She's got a tolerance to those Arbor Gold people, it seems.
That's a good point. Yeah. And these sand snakes won't be so easily misled either.
No, and not to come. I mean, George has really proven that some of that whole kind of fetishization of the Dornish people, really with Aerys, he hammers that home. No pun intended. He hammers that home, and we see that already with Cersei and Tyna Merryweather.
Yes, we've definitely got a section for Tyna in here because she's a perfect example of Cersei being misled and just walking right into it and loving it. Like she's like, I love these sweet lies. And this Cersei's counsel really reminds me of something of the opposite, meaning Stannis. Stannis in a lot of ways would be a reasonable pick for someone who's the opposite of Cersei in a lot of ways. But they have an interesting almost parallel here that they both have eschewed noble blood as a criteria for a small council. Normally that's something that is a big deal, that you only have noble people on your council. But their version of merit is hugely at odds here. Stannis chooses people based on what he sees as merit, which I think more people would probably agree with Stannis' version of merit, though certainly not 100%. But Cersei quite clearly just picks people that will tell her what she wants to hear or that are loyal to her. She gets angry at harsh truths and turns away from them, while Stannis will still get angry at harsh truths, but one could argue that he tends to face them. Again, not all of them. I think he gets maybe too much of a reputation in that regard, but he does face a lot of them. And this is reflected too with beverages. We've got a beverage quote here that fits really well with Stannis. And if you don't mind, Chloe, do the honors.
Robert could piss in a cup and men would call it wine, but I offer them pure cold water and they squint in suspicion and mutter to each other about how queer it tastes. Stannis ground his teeth.
And some of this is interesting that Stannis just doesn't get it. Like, yeah, Stannis, people like sweetness and being told what they want to hear. He doesn't, to him, he hates that, and he rejects it. But he also doesn't understand why other people do it. And I think that's part of the thing with Stannis is that he understands the dishonesty of mankind, or understands that dishonesty happens, but doesn't necessarily understand why people lie, or kind of in the same way he doesn't understand weakness. He's iron. That is his description. So with Robert, it's interesting too, because Cersei associates Jaime with Robert at one point, says, you're looking more and more like Jaime, which is very ironic because she's the one acting more and more like Robert. And of course, looking like Robert is nothing compared to acting like Robert. And so Cersei's being very hypocritical there. But also, this beverage theme could apply to all the Baratheons. If we go to Robert, he wasn't really about being lied to. He was more about turning a blind eye. He was more about drinking until he could forget and drinking anything. He would drink red wine, beer, ale. Of course, I'm sure he liked Arbor Gold too, but he probably just didn't appreciate it. He probably it's just another means to get drunk and to forget and to be blind. So, yeah. What do you think about Robert here?
He certainly wasn't drinking for the taste. And who is, let's be honest, but you just get to an age where you're like, it's too much to drink for the taste, too much sugar, you get a hangover, you want to sleep and you can't. It's a lot. Anyways, Robert had to get up, maybe sometimes sit on the throne, puke a little. It's a lot. It's a good point to bring his vices into this. I almost forgot Robert existed because he died. Spoilers. But there's quite
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Shit. There's a mirror in the way Robert's perceived when Catelyn sees Renly in Clash of Kings 2, especially for that golden idea, the golden stag, the Baratheon gold. We've been discussing that Arbor Gold in a political sense as capital is something glittery and distracting, a lie or a front. And Renly is kind of this personification of Arbor Gold. He's a golden stag wrapped up in the tendrils of the reach, right? Their thorns are dug in, even in the way he dresses. Small wonder the lords gather around him with such fervor, she thought. He is Robert come again. Renly was handsome as Robert had been handsome. Long of limb, broad of shoulder, the same coal black hair, fine and straight, the same deep blue eyes, the same easy smile. The slender circlet around his brows seemed to suit him well. It was soft gold, a ring of roses exquisitely wrought. At the front lifted a stag's head of dark green jade, adorned with golden eyes and golden antlers. That's the Baratheon sigil wrapped in a high garden. And when we look at Renly's rule and how it rings false in the end, right? Even with how he's used at the Blackwater as a false image to evoke something, to get the people's morale. He is the Arbor Gold of the Baratheon group. So, of course, Robert wouldn't be representative or used of that, right? Despite that Eddard 10 mention, I think it's a stronger concept when evoking Renly.
I think so. That's a really good take. And we could also borrow from Donald Noy, who said Robert was the true steel, Stannis was iron, Renly was copper. And copper, the way Donald Noy describes copper, is flashy and pretty, but not worth all that much at the end of the day.
Probably a migraine in the morning, again, if you don't drink enough water, or get enough sleep. And if we're calling Renly kind of the Aegon II of the story, the usurper, like the first Egg 2, Aegon II loved his wine, and as we'll talk later, that's how he died.
That is true. He did die to getting poisoned. Yeah, good call. And this also is very applicable to the concept of some of the other characters we're going to talk about later. So we'll come back to this. Hold on to this idea, folks, the idea of the different characters cast this way. Also, let's look at a particularly large family. The Freys, of course, have to get involved here. Two castles can mean two faces. Now, it's not maybe what you'd expect. The Red Wedding didn't have Arbor Gold that I know of because they seem to not spend much money on the guests that they were planning on killing. It's notable at the time how bad the food was. There was lots of alcohol, but it wasn't the quality stuff. However, a different Frey was involved in serving Arbor Gold to certain people. He had things he wanted to get from.
Yes, the quote is, "Do not discount this man, Lucian," Qyburn said. "Last night he feeded 30 of the most devout on suckling pig and Arbor Gold, and by day he hands out hard bread to the poor to prove his piety." So
I mentioned it's a Frey. You all probably know it's a Frey. But nobody mentions in this scene that Lucian is a Frey. Not only a Frey, but an older Frey who's kind of close to his dad in terms of age, like one of the oldest ones there. And he's showing two faces, I suppose. Lavishness for the most devout, the ones who are going to decide who the next High Septon is, unless, the High Sparrow comes in and just takes it all, which is what happens. But hey, this was before that. And winning over the poor with simple bread. Now, I ask you this. We're told that Arbor Gold is ridiculously expensive. Which costs more? Arbor Gold for 30 or hard bread for thousands? I don't know, but I would bet the hard bread for thousands might be cheaper. Certainly money better spent, either way.
Yeah, it depends on who you're buying the hard bread from, right? And you look at the Reach, they went to their Jimmy John's on the corner. They're like, day old bread, corporate, let's go. And they bought it all for half off. Like, that's the thing, is that's their resource. So yes, they still had labor they had to pay, but they already pay their farmers minuscule for labor. Like,
Great
you
point.
think labor counted in back then? No, it's not. These are the small folk. They're poor people. No one cares about them.
Yeah.
It's something to think about. Like, that's definitely cheaper. And Arbor Gold putting that much, I don't know, it's something we keep coming back to. It's like Littlefinger, who was in charge of kind of this economic disruption in the first part of the series there, and Tywin as well, who also was a big part of that destruction when you look at the decimation of the Riverlands. Anyone that puts more energy into decimating a land's resources and people, but claims they want to lead and are just doing what's better for the better good of everything, are wrong and they're villains. I want you guys to write that down. So like Tywin and Littlefinger, bad. Like put it little sticky note, bad. They're bad.
BAD.
But this is something everyone discounts in this small council meeting. And like when we are introduced to the story, you're like, the Justiciar does this, the Master of Horse is in charge of this, the Master of Arms would do this. You learn what these roles would do. You play CK2 and you're like, I'm sending my guy over here. Go make some peace, go make some relations happen. Qyburn straight up says, I wouldn't discount this. I'm a traveled ex-Maester, and this is the faith meeting and starting their big uprising and pushing back against the crown. Whether Lucian wins or not, he doesn't. He's from Walder Frey's second marriage. So like as many Freys as there are, he's in the OG first half of Walder Frey's tree. Like, no, he's now off and in the running for Septon, and he doesn't care about that, but he had a swan mother, so it's likely he has a good amount of influence. The Holy, even though they set aside their families, we see how well that goes for some of them. Tyrion 9 in A Clash of Kings, Not a Cast, just finished their really extensive episodes of Tyrion 9, and they tore the last High Septon apart. Oh, yeah. Literally, he was torn apart in that chapter. And yes, this later in this chapter is a meeting to get Lucian in office, but the uprising needs those doors to open, whoever's in charge. And they make that clear because he is 9 votes short of becoming the new High Septon in Cersei 6 after this, which again, Cersei does not listen, and they force the most devout to then pick the Septon. And this is kind of similar to that overall blindness of the Tyrells and the Reach with Cersei. It reeks of Arbor Gold, showing up, performing charity to win the small folk. Cersei's lost King's Landing and Feast, and she doesn't even know it. Even in dance, she still doesn't get it. And even immediately after Lucian's brought up, she then fantasizes about how Oraine Waters looks like Rhaegar for 3 paragraphs instead of paying attention to any of the religious stuff, which explains why she makes bad choices regarding religious groups in King's Landing.
It's kind of an aside to say, but I love that about Cersei's chapters because it enables them to be so chock full of information. You've got the real thing happening, which you could focus on, but Cersei decides to daydream about something else, which is a whole new topic, yet still an interesting topic, because, Oraine Waters is interesting too. But yeah. It's like, whoa, where do we go with all this?
I have this theory after we just read these Jaime chapters, and I haven't written it out or really explored it harder than just whenever we were talking about Jaime, but everything Jaime says that Cersei should do throughout Feast when he's on the road and in Storm, I theorize she's going to do the opposite in The Winds of Winter. Oh. If she has not already done the opposite, wow. Which she has on many of them. Like, he'll be like, I think Cersei's going to do this stupid thing. Or if I was her, I'd make sure not to do this thing. And like the next chapter is always, I'm going to do this thing.
That is a good point. And this is a pretty good segue to our next section here, which is still on Cersei, but it's another perhaps precise example of how Cersei immediately reacts to news that is concerning. And you can see that pretty much the first thing she does here is to try to deny it's real or to make up other possibilities rather than focusing on what seems to be straightforward truth. So here we go with another quote.
Willis believes that they did not follow the coast, said Marjorie. They made the voyage out of sight of land, sailing far out into the sunset sea and swooping back in from the west. More like the cripple didn't have his watchtowers manned, and now he fears to have us know it. The little queen is making excuses for her brother. Cersei's mouth was dry.
I need a cup of Arbor Gold.
Same.
If the Ironmen decided to take the Arbor next, the whole realm might soon be going thirsty.
Stannis may have had a hand in this. Balon Greyjoy offered my lord father an alliance. Perhaps his son has offered one to Stannis. Now, the quote continues with Pycelle being like, wait, what? Why would he? That doesn't make any sense. And yeah, it doesn't. It's completely not. It is nonsense. It's like, why the heck would they do that? Why would Stannis and Balon? Wait, what? I don't, it doesn't, but why not just believe what's being told here? She just immediately leaps to, more like they weren't guarding the place properly. Like, where does she get that notion? Where does she have the idea that the Shield Islanders are slackers? I mean, it's completely made up.
So she's projecting. It's just a lot of projecting. She's just like, my life is so bad, so their lives have to be 20 times worse.
Yeah, because she's that is actually a great point, because she's constantly thinking about how she's always being balked and people don't do what she says. And it's like, if they would just do what I say, everything would work out. And so she's projecting that, they're not doing, they're not following their leaders either. They also have failure within their organizations. They have the same problems with people obeying that I do, but they don't really. That's really good. So you have some notes here about Cersei as Cersei. That's good.
Yeah. So I don't know. It depends on pronunciation. Some people go with the Greek, the Kirke. Or
that does help us
Cersei.
distinguish here.
It is, but we'll just keep going. I like Cersei or Circe. So Homer's Odyssey. Don't know how you feel about it right now, Aziz, but I hope you're buckled in. Hope
I'm
you're
ready. Hold on. Let's go with the old.
Oh, you got a pour? You got a. Oh,
there we go.
There it
Okay.
goes.
Okay, now
There
I'm ready.
All right, good. Tuck in, story time. So Cersei, the goddess, is depicted in Homer's Odyssey as this beautiful enchantress isolated on a dense island where docile lions and wolves prowl around her home. Very,
Lions and
kind
wolves,
of,
you say?
yes, lions and wolves. And she lures Odysseus and his crew into her home with song and plans to drug them, to shapeshift them into pigs. Long story short, it went from 0 to 100 real fast.
Pigs, you say?
Pigs, yes. So they get saved by the bell, and by the bell, I mean Eurylochus. He shows up and he's like about to go in. He's like, no, I think there's treachery. He warns the rest of the people. Hermes also hops in to save Odysseus, who eventually is able to free his men after a year of capture and pig life. I mean, this is peak Cersei, luring men in, turning them into pigs, and ruling from an enchanted castle. She would do that if she could, or if she's trying to. I think it's just significant because Cersei, literally, the goddess Cersei used golden honeyed wine to commit this treachery.
Ooh, that's right on. Yeah, very nice. It's so bad, too, because you think about, what's happening on those Shield Islands, too. It was a real horror show, the people being treated awfully, and Cersei's like, like this happened whether or not they were slack about guarding the watchtowers. It still needs to be dealt with. And yes, the Arbor, she thinks about if the Iron Man decided to take the Arbor next. At least she has that thought, because that's true, and it is what happens next. And what's after the Arbor, potentially Oldtown, which that's a lot bigger of a problem than just drying up the wine, which is a pretty big problem. But Oldtown, oh boy, that would be huge. So we've got a little more on Oldtown later, but just to show what Cersei is not thinking of, even when she gets close to it. And all this is just wrapped up in her wanting to feel good instead of having to deal with all these big problems. But, Cersei, queens have tough jobs. It's not about, you're not Stannis. Stannis realized, what was that line that, he tried to win the throne to save the throne.
Cart in front of the horse and the winning the throne before. Yeah.
Cersei,
I know about it.
Cersei doesn't even conceptualize that, but she's definitely doing the wrong end of it. She's like, oh, I deserve the throne. She's
Cersei's
very
like,
deserving.
where do I get a horse? Where do I get a cart? What do I do with them? Can't someone do it for me?
Yeah, she's like, she shows up at the throne. She's like, where's my horse and cart? And it should be waiting here for me.
I'm the queen.
Okay, so here's Tyna, perhaps her biggest error of all, maybe the faith militant. It's hard to say which of her oblivious mistakes is the most oblivious, but this is a pretty big one. Tyna is a really interesting character, and I'm also particularly interested in her because, like a lot of these topics, we don't exactly know where this is going, and I'm very curious how it's going to come out. So this is a pretty innocuous little end of a chapter here. We're jumping back a little bit. That was Cersei 7, and this is Cersei 4.
Outside, a cold wind was rising. They stayed up late into the morning, drinking Arbor Gold and telling one another tales. Tyna got quite drunk, and Cersei pried the name of her secret lover from her. He was a Mirish sea captain, half a pirate with black hair to the shoulders and a scar that ran across his face from chin to ear. 100 times I told him no, and he said yes, the other woman told her, until finally I was saying yes as well. He was not the sort of man to be denied.
This is more of a classic, straightforward example on the surface of just getting drunk and learning their secrets, quote, and I love the line that is telling one another tales, because yeah, there's probably some dishonesty in the scene too, but Cersei says in the scene she knew a man like that. She says Robert, but thinks Jaime. And I have to think Tyna probably even sniffed that out, because Tyna's awfully clever and insightful. Part of the reason why she's like assigned to Cersei, so to speak, by whomever assigned her. But it's funny that Cersei is given a lot of secrets to Tyna, indirectly or directly, throughout their relationship. But she winkled this secret out of her, the name of her former, like, this is irrelevant. This has no value whatsoever, the name of her
And
former
she thinks she's so masterful at manipulating, too. She's like, I am a master manipulator, Cersei Lannister, first of her name. I did it. And it's just like, dude, it's some rando that you're never going to meet because you're going to die before he even has a chance to come to King's Landing. It's funny because so she's giving away a lot of her secrets and all of her big plans. And like she's censored in the first half of the book, but like by the second half of the book, she's just sloppy. You know, she's just real sloppy, and she's just like giving things away to Tyna, and she's kind of imposing herself more. And Tyna's like, oh God, I'm in too deep. And this felt like Cersei's first real night of friendship with Tyna. Like, to her, she trusted her in this. It was the first time since Tyna had been attending her that she wasn't like, she's not going to report this. And then what happens within the next chapters, Cersei baptizes her friendship in Arbor Gold with Tyna. Tyna escapes intact with her husband back to the Reach. The companionship was a total lie. Cersei taken by the faith. And it reminds me a bit of Jaime's chapters that are alongside these. And he has Tom of Seven Streams that he can't shut his mouth as he tells Tom of Seven Streams. Like, Tom of Seven Streams knows exactly what to tell everyone. He's like, oh yeah, Jaime's going to be here. And Jaime is leaving the Riverlands. And he's like, you should hang out with my aunt. She's the real boss. Bye.
And just so happens that Brienne shows up to encourage Jaime to leave the column. I wonder.
How did she find him? What did he know? Their intel is really good. Really good. It's no better agency, but it's up there, you know?
So you would say perhaps this entire companionship is a lie. It is the Arbor Gold, but it's almost in reverse. Cersei is plying Tyna with Arbor Gold, but she's the one giving secrets, while Tyna is giving things that seem like secrets but have no real value. And that is very telling. And we'll probably have more of that to come. Couple more comments from y'all watching live. Sanrixian with another super chat says, you both are giving me life and will make it to the last 13 minutes of my day. Thank you. Well, we love you, Sanrixian. We're glad to be helping out your day. Laura Brondos sends a super chat, says, here's to Lies and Arbor Gold. Love y'all. We love you too, Laura. Thanks for being such a great mod over at the History of Westeros Facebook group, and a good friend besides. You were the latter before the former. Carl Karsnark says, Chloe's doing some epic method narration. Hashtag becoming the book. There you go. You are doing a fantastic job. Doing some good voices and everything.
Yeah, I'm very happy that I was a little too busy because I get to hear Chloe read all of this.
Yeah, Shay, by the way, is working with a new setup, so that is taking up a lot of focus.
And this one I wanted to share. Carl Karsnark also brought up getting blood drunk. This is referring, of course, to wine being the blood of Christ. He was calling it metal. But then he brought up that Blood Raven's real name could be Booze Raven. And then I realized, of course, Blood Raven has a wine-stained birthmark on his face.
Hey, that is pretty good.
I just had to point that out. How cool.
So I think we've been lacking on the puns so far, so it's time to get a little punnier. So this section is called Lies and Arbor Gold and Company. And this touches back on Varys's comment about, oh, sure, the wars will be over soon. And, well, here is a quote from none other than young Griff himself describing part of his origin story.
The lad flushed. That was not me. I told you. That was some tanner's son from Pisswater Bend whose mother died birthing him. His father sold him to Lord Varys for a jug of Arbor Gold. He had other sons, but had never tasted Arbor Gold. Varys gave the Pisswater boy to my lady mother and carried me away.
A Dance with Dragons Tyrion 6. So that's a rather huge plot line, with Arbor Gold noted to be the coin that bought life for the son of Rhaegar and death for some other poor child. But it's probably not true, is it? Sorry, young Griff, but you probably aren't really the son of Rhaegar. And if you reverse this theme, if you think about it, if this Arbor Gold theme is convincing to you at all, then the placement of it here is more evidence that Aegon VI is not Rhaegar's son. It piles on the existing body of evidence that is probably pretty strong already. Varys and Illyrio are sort of banking on Aegon VI looking so overwhelmingly awesome that lords and ladies and commons and priests and sparrows and all will want to believe he's Rhaegar's son. Very much on point here. It's a sweet, sweet lie that this kid coming out of nowhere, backed by very conspiratorial, dishonest folk, oh, he just is Rhaegar's. And yeah, they snuck him out at the last second. Yeah, that's what happened. And look how their plan is for him to swoop in and save the day, save the realm from all these awful things happening, and that'll help make everyone believe he's really the son of Rhaegar. It's really selling the lie along with the story. And the Golden Company part, they don't need it for it to be true. The Golden Company doesn't care. They, like Illyrio says, a dragon is a dragon, or Varys said, whoever said that line, a dragon is a dragon. They don't care if it's true or not. It's going to work for them. It's going to get them their goals. John Connington, however, does believe it. He believes it well. Now, no Arbor Gold was used on John Connington. He's a rather sober man. But there are lies around his death. Remember that everyone was told that he drank himself to death. On top of that, we've got a really cool reverse parallel. He uses the cheapest wine possible from the cellars of his family castle to conceal his grayscale. And the cheapest wine possible is kind of an opposite of Arbor Gold, because that is the most expensive wine possible. I think that's pretty clever there by George doing that. Even if it may not have been intentional, I will go ahead and count it as if it was. What's your take on all this?
Tyrion has something to say about that too. Later on, when he's in that crew, he actually goes looking for wine and he offers it right to Penny, and the wine that he has is like piss water wine. He's like, it's no Arbor Gold. Interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's closer to piss than Arbor Gold. You're right. Oh, very good.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a very similar thing. So that's great. He's really actually kind of etching out the wine available in that plot.
Nice.
George really pays attention to his wine, and I like that about him. And there is something going on here, right? Illyrio's role, not just like with the Golden Company stuff, but him in fiscally backing the entire fake Aegon scenario is super interesting, because he becomes this financier of not only peddling Aegon as a king, but also starting a war to disrupt the economy and secession of Westeros, right? Like, wine is once more used as a huge political capital in Illyrio's chapters. The framework is set for Aegon, the Pisswater Prince, but we see it reinforced in Tyrion 1 in A Dance with Dragons before any of this. Tyrion left the fat woman to their loaves and kettles and went in search of the cellar where Illyrio had decanted him the night before. It was not hard to find. There was enough wine there to keep him drunk for 100 years, sweet reds from the Reach and sour reds from Dorne, pale Pentoshi ambers, the green nectar of Myr, 70 casks of Arbor Gold, even wines from the fabled East, from Karth and Yeti and Ashai by the Shadow. Tyrion doesn't choose the Arbor Gold, for the record, because he's getting drunk on kinslaying and strong wine tonight. But Illyrio has all of this wine in his arsenal. It means he can pick a trick for each occasion, so to speak. It reminds me of Melisandre with her different smoke charms, right, of figuring out what she's going to do. Illyrio opened his cellar, and he's like, how am I going to sell this prince? While Lies in Arbor Gold is that specific trick that shows up, which George is flexing it now. Like, now that he's like, oh, this is fun, I'm going to play with this more. Every time you see it, he's winking at you. But it signifies lying. I think the other alcohol and wine symbolism is just as important to think about, like Tyrion's strong wine or mulled wine being popular in the north, like the Romans once used to face winter. Illyrio's a merchant, and we call him the cheesemonger, but business for him is a front for the deal behind the door. Illyrio doesn't make money off of selling a block of cheese or some wine. He sells ideas, which is what he has sold to the Golden Company. His idea is dressed like a king. It's all a king requires, and the consumers are going to buy what he's selling, hook, line, and sinker.
Well said. Hell yeah. That is so on point and accurate and describes it all so very well. I have nothing more to add. Yeah, that is so true. Like, this is such a huge plot, obviously, and another example of one where we really just don't know where it's going, where, like, we have excitement built up around it. It's poised on the edge of a climax here, and how Ariane's going to mix in with all this, and how Cersei's going to mix in with all this, whether Sansa will be involved at all, or who else. And yeah, it's just so very exciting. But we know that the backdrop, the setup for it all, is based so much on lies and, well, Arbor Gold and things that feel like Arbor Gold or have similar symbolism to it. Let's move on to another sort of opposite parallel. This is a short one. It's a historical one. This one I've called Truths and Arbor Golden Rod, Ring, and Mask. See, sometimes you're supposed to lie. Sometimes lies are good. It's one of the complicated things of life is that you rarely can deal in absolutes. For example, I don't know, I don't personally believe in Santa Claus. Sorry to any children listening, but I don't go around telling 5-year-olds that Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? That's not cool. Here's a similar type example.
For all the 5-year-olds listening, that's just because Aziz doesn't know for sure. He's just never met Santa.
Yeah, that's true.
Just so you know. You can still believe.
Yeah, we do have a lot of 5-year-olds who listen to the show, so I should be careful. Lots of 5-year-old scholars of A Song of Ice and Fire out there. So yeah, here's a quote.
Yes, and first I want to preface this defending my pronunciation of Princess Daea before Ashea attacks me because I don't say it the same as her. I pronounce it.
I will never attack you for that. As long as you don't say Vitire.
No, never. Or Brienne.
Yeah, none of those. Actually, but you can say Daella how you want. That's how I say it.
It's just, it rhymes with paella.
Oh,
in my head.
Paella. Oh, yes. She's Spanish.
Yeah. I don't even know how you said it now. I can't repeat it. Anyway, go ahead. Let's hear this.
Right. The matter came to a head in 73 AC. Prince Vagon was 10 years old and Princess Daea 9 when one of the queen's companions, new to the Red Keep, teasingly asked the two of them when they would be married. Vagon reacted as if he had been slapped.
I would never marry her,
the boy said in front of half the court.
She can barely read. She should find some lord in need of stupid children, for that's the only sort he will ever have of her.
Princess Daea, as might be expected, burst into tears and fled the hall with her mother, the queen, rushing after her. It fell to her sister, Alyssa, at 3 years Vagon's elder, to pour a flagon of wine over his head. Even that did not make the prince repent.
You are wasting Arbor Gold,
was all he said before stalking from the hall to change his clothing. Poor Princess Paella. Okay, I just want to say, she spends her whole childhood in this book and she's just like, I don't want to talk to boys. They're stupid and dumb and scary. And all she wants to do is I don't know, ride horses and read books or do nothing, which same. And literally all it is just dudes being like, want to get drunk? I want to marry you. That's it.
And this poor sweet sensitive girl is afraid of cats. That's how sensitive this one is. So yeah, she's definitely not wanting to get drunk with anyone, even herself. So the idea here is drenching him in Arbor Gold is kind of symbolism for how he should have behaved. He should have at least couched his language in sweet lies, or said nothing. That would have worked too. But he tells a transparent lie as soon as he's drenched, which is like, I don't care that you dumped wine on me, when he clearly does care. Later, Alyssa will dress in mail and humiliate Vagon in the training yard, while Daea, now I'm saying it your way, sees it all from above and maybe grins, maybe smiles, or maybe she's afraid of that too, because I don't know. But Vagon never returns to the practice yard, which indicates he cared about being humiliated. But fittingly, he becomes the Archmaester of Math and Economics, which is designated by a ring, rod, and mask of yellow gold. Good place for a hyper-rational dude to be. Obviously not much for ruling, not much for relationships. So yeah, stick him where he can work on math and economics, and he would know how much money was wasted by dumping a jug of Arbor Gold on his head. So
I would even go as far to say that it's a made-up subject and a made-up Archmaestership. So honestly, it makes sense that it's colored like Arbor Gold. It's all fake. It's just fake words. Fake thing he became. So I jest. And I think Fire and Blood, I really need to reread it. I just haven't I've done 2 rereads, I want to say. The first one really dedicated. Second one was just lightly rereading stuff I cared about. And I think it brought a ton of symbolic wine moments, not necessarily all Arbor Gold, but it does make me wonder, and I'm going to put this on you two. Do you think Andro Farman poisoned Arbor Gold for Rhaena and her ladies? Do you think it was Arbor Gold? It's not said what it was.
Good theory. Yeah, very well could be. Unless I'm told otherwise, I choose to believe it is.
Yeah, there's that line in Fire and Blood. Andro Farman was located at last in the chamber of the painted table, a long sword clutched in his grasp. He made no attempt to deny the poisonings. Instead, he boasted, I brought them cups of wine and they drank. They thanked me and they drank. You have so many different stories of this, like trappings of power, right, in their history, but it feels like wine seems to be a crux of many of them. Arya Targaryen stealing ale and wine as an out-of-control but slightly affable child. Visera getting drunk and naked and trying to get in bed with Balin that one time. Aegon dying from Arbor Red, his favorite wine, because it was poisoned. There's definitely some vice stuff going on with the throne, and I do think it's commentary, obviously, on a vice, on a drug in real life. I mean, it's very addictive, etc. So it's interesting to see how when rich people get it, it changes.
The whole them thanking me and they drank really does feel like the type of theme we're dealing with here with Arbor Gold and how they're being thanked for being deceived or in this case killed. But it's similar type of, that's still deception in a form. So yeah, that is a really good one. I like that I feel like even though it doesn't say Arbor Gold, there's a really good chance it would be. Maybe it's the red because of the poisoning, but hey, we've got examples of Arbor Gold and poison, even though it may more often be with the red. Dom Tartaglia says, does this apply to Sorella? And Carl Karsnork says, no, that's Soraya.
Oh my God, no, that one is Sorella, okay? I'm not going to give any reason, but besides, like, maybe I used more than one brain cell for that one, okay? I just decided that one's Sorella, but the rest is Paella. That's the rule.
Would it be like Airis then for Alaris?
This is getting out of hand.
Maybe that's like Spanish pronunciation and we're just going to do silent L's like Airis. So if you want to go paella on it.
What was Dom actually asking? Does this apply to Sorella?
If that's how you would say her name.
Oh, okay. He was saying that. Okay. Good. As long as we covered it. Alex of the Roynar says, I'm moving to Sunspear and opening a new inn serving food and ale. Our name, the Princess Paella.
I love it. Lots of peppers and sausage. I'm hungry. Okay.
Those Eugene Young says, those purple eyes are mesmerizing. LOL. Reminds me of the Danes. What's her name? I know I've seen her before, but was late to the stream.
Deanna Reed. Moving on.
But I told Eugene Young where to find you, but I had to share this lovely compliment.
That was
yes, no, I love it. Well, and you know, George has said that Ashara's eyes were that Danish purple is very Elizabeth Taylor violet, right? So a little different from the Targaryen look, but still a little out there, still a little elven or something, and I like that.
Right on.
Just like you.
Yeah,
well, your eyes.
Like
I mean, if your eyes look beautiful on the stream and in real life.
Thank God.
With that, we reach our mid-roll. We've got a whole nother half an episode to go with a lot more great examples. But real quick, let's take care of some people who deserve a shout-out. Starting off with our Blood Riders, Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt. Ko'olkoe, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow. And Kokavo the Tamer, wielder of the Wildfire Whip Gehenna. Also want to shout out our Queens of Love and Beauty. From the depths of Flea Bottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer has declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. And a Laurel of Glory in the name of love to Bud of House Beresford, Knight of Tolkien, and Arbiter of Scotch. From Sandy the Dragon, Blood of Queen Daenerys, and Lady of Jameson. And also a shout out to our Ironborn captains. Black Matos Stormrider is captain of the Rusted Hinge. Sir Selvus Redblade of White Harbor is captain of Trident of the North. Lord Chucklaw is captain of the Droman Nightblood, is destroyer of evil, and not the designer of the art on these maps, but the designer of the actual maps themselves, the material and the printer. He is, check him out at phantomaniacs.com. Does a lot of great work. John Gregor is captain of the Fist of the Drowned God. Sir Kiron of Lonely Light is Scourge of the Sunset Sea, captain of Naga's Breath, a Dromund armed with siphons of wildfire. Sounds dangerous. Aileen is Archer Queen, captain of the Border Collie. Crimson Kate is captain of the Drowned Queen's Vengeance. Jasana the Just is collector of tolls, captain of the Golden Gift. Lord Mitch of House Bailey is captain of Widow's Blood. His heir is Lordling Mason of House Bailey. Beneath the Gold is a podcast focusing on lesser-known A Song of Ice and Fire characters. Check them out. Prakash is Lord Protector of the Gallifreyans, captain of the TARDIS of the Seven Seas. Tempest of House Brewer is captain of the Summer Storm. And Catherine the Cruel is captain of the Kraken's Claw. Chloe, do you have anyone you'd like to shout out right now? Here we are at the mid-roll.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Miss Monero is in the chat, or was in the chat, Monero TV. We were just on with Monero and AK, Alicia Kingston, and T-Baby, and the whole crew doing a ginger ale chat a little bit ago. Me and my other host, Eliana. So please also check out Eliana. She has lots of great essays up on Reddit. Oh my God, what is her Reddit name? Oh my God, I'm losing it. I'm losing it. Glass Table Girl. Boom.
Oh yeah, that's a good name.
I almost got divorced on air. No. I started sweating. You guys saw the sweat. I was like,
real quick, what did you mean by a ginger ale stream?
Oh man, so there are these chats that those ladies do over at Monero Geek TV, Monero, Alicia Kingston, T-Baby, you name it, and they are wild. They drink ginger ale, and we did a Song of Ice and Fire themed one, and I'm gonna be honest that some inappropriate topics came up that I don't want to repeat it, but it was a little wild. There was some wild stuff. Eliana loves Donkey Kong and Bowser. She would be with them forever. She's not gonna be happy when I said that, but here I am. And I think I said Dario. I think we were talking like best experience mating with someone in the Song of Ice and Fire, or in any world. And I think I said Dario and Sandor, obviously, because hung and
Aziz can't handle this, I don't think. He's just laughing.
Story checks out.
Yep. So definitely anytime subscribe to Monero's YouTube channel, because when those chats go live, they're there and then they're gone. It's very exclusive. It's not uploaded. This is a one and done experience. So if you weren't there, you don't get to know. And
that is very cool.
Yeah, it's exclusive. It's exclusive.
I think Don Willie used to do something like that. He would have his video up for just like 48 hours and take it down. It's kind of an interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. We have 5 more sections before our outro. I'm going to read the names because I'm unduly proud of the puns contained within. We have Harbor Gold. We have Pies in Arbor Gold. We have Leos in Arbor Blackmail. We have Death in Arbor Gold. And finally, we have Lies and His Arbor Gold. Starting with Harbor Gold, we have another example from Fire and Blood. We got some history here. Nice long quote that we haven't thought about these folks in a while, but we did a whole episode on them, and it is a fun one.
I totally forgot that this was a thing, too. I'm glad you put this in. 12 days of smooth sailing out of Westeros. The Sun Chaser and her 2 companions were as far south as the Summer Islands, according to their best calculations, and farther west than any ship had sailed before, or any ship that had returned to tell of it, at least. On the Lady Meredith and Autumn Moon, casks of Arbor Gold were breached to toast the accomplishment. On Sun Chaser, the sailors drank a spiced honey wine from Lannisport, and if any of them was disquieted that they had not seen a bird for the past 4 days, he held his tongue. The gods hate man's arrogance, the Septons teach us, and the 7-pointed star says that pride goes before a fall. It may well be that Alice Westhill and the High Towers celebrated too loudly and too early there in the ocean deeps, for soon after that, the grand voyage began to go badly wrong.
We lost the wind first.
Sir Eustace told his grandfather's court.
For almost a fortnight, there was not so much as a breeze, and the ships moved only so far as we could tow them. It was discovered that 12 casks of meat on Autumn Moon were crawling with maggots. A small enough thing by itself, but an ill omen. The wind finally returned one day near sunset when the sky turned red as blood. But the look of it set men to muttering. I told them it boded well for us, but I lied. So farther west than any ship is the first claim. That's why they celebrate. Notice that the explorer of the group, the real explorer of the group, the Sun Chaser, does not drink Arbor Gold. They do not share this delusion of, oh yeah, this is as far west as anyone has ever gone. I mean, the Summer Islands were right there in the same sentence, and the Summer Islanders are known for their expertise at sailing. And in fact, they show it later in this anecdote. But at first, it's just even without this later anecdote, I'm very skeptical that the Summer Islanders haven't done this, gone far western than this. I mean, if not them, then someone else too. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that I know there was some dissent in the chat earlier during this episode live. So if you're listening after to the podcast version, some people were upset that there was some Hightower hate. And I would just like to say that the Hightower ships drink Arbor Gold, which canonically, according to this episode on History of Westeros, which I can say as somebody that perpetuates canon weekly on the internet, the Hightower ships,
it's in the name.
Yeah, it's in the name. The Hightower ships drink Arbor Gold, which probably means they're bloody fools. I'm just saying, it's a Hightower thing.
It's those high towers. I can't hear you malign Melora Hightower. I know you would
Otto, or what about Alicent? Wait,
but
let me.
You wouldn't insult Melora or Lyness or Leighton, maybe.
Just because there's 3 good ones.
What about Maris the Maid? What about Maris the Maid? Okay.
What about her, Ashaya?
That's Megan D. Flynn. You would insult her?
Ooh, she's bringing the big guns.
What about Allery Hightower? She's fine. Okay. Well, we'll stop here.
I'm caught in the middle.
I have a Hightower shield. I would love to live in Oldtown as a Hightower. So this is
good. I would love to.
Attack.
You know what? How about 300 to 301 AC? Do you think you should go vacation there, Ashaya? How about that? How about there? You think it's gonna be fun? Do you think it's gonna be fun? Do you like the Hightower now?
If I lived in the Hightower, it would. If I lived maybe 10 years prior.
Well, enjoy now. 300, 301 AC. Come on.
No, not now. I didn't say now.
Oh, why not? What's wrong?
I don't think anyone wants to be in Oldtown, whether you're a Hightower or not.
I'm gonna stay right here.
No, I think that the Hightower ships, I just thought that was kind of fun because they're often depicted foolishly is all.
Yeah.
They have some foolish depictions.
I can't wait to see you hate on Alicent when Hot D comes out.
Ooh.
Very curious how they'll depict her.
I am too. That laugh says it all. So the line in this quote was, "The gods hate man's arrogance," and indeed, bad things start happening to the non-Sun Chaser ships. The Autumn Moon is destroyed by either lightning or a kraken, which is, I don't know how you can mistake one of those for the other. But Lady Meredith was damaged by a whale. A whale just rammed them. Like, talk about great luck. You're just out there and a whale's like, I don't like you. I'm going to ram you because I think you're another male of my species and I'm going to fight you. And they end up in Sithorios, which is quite a miss from where they were going. And the Summer Islanders rescue them. The same Summer Islanders who we suspect have gone far farther west than these ships had. And they're the ones who rescue them, which indicates their knowledge of the area. In fact, the anecdote says, we think the Summer Islanders know more about Sithorios than they let on. They probably know more about a lot of things than they let on, and especially things to do with sailing, given their expertise there. So I think this is a really cool one. It's a very straightforward, because it's the only example I can really think of that very straightforwardly has one group not drink the Arbor Gold and have success, where the other group does and falls victim to delusions because of it. So it's very distinct in that sense, which makes it interesting and maybe a bit of a standout. Maybe it's a bit of a flagship example.
Oh my God. The whale, how about that?
Well, let's move on then. So next we have one of the more important examples of Arbor Gold, one of the bigger fun plots, also a bit gross, but interesting and fun. That is pies in Arbor Gold. Is this a concealed identity or concealed pie identity? Here's the quote.
The born pie identity. The Lord of White Harbor had furnished the food and drink, black stout and yellow beer and wines red and gold and purple, brought up from the warm south on fat-bottomed ships and aged in his deep cellars. The wedding guests gorged on cod cakes and winter squash, hills of neeps and great round wheels of cheese on smoking slabs of mutton and beef ribs charred, almost black, and lastly on 3 great wedding pies as wide across as wagon wheels, their flaky crusts stuffed to bursting with carrots, onions, turnips, parsnips, mushrooms, and chunks of seasoned pork, swimming in a savory brown gravy. Ramsay hacked off slices with his falchion, and Wyman Manderly himself served, presenting the first steaming portion to Roose Bolton and his fat Frey wife, the next to Sir Hostine and Sir Aenys, the sons of Walder Frey.
The best pie you've ever tasted, my lords,
the fat lord declared.
Wash it down with Arbor Gold and savor every bite. I know I shall. Steaming portions indeed. Savory brown gravy. Pork, you say? Yeah.
Savory brown gravy. Ugh.
It's funny how if you're not paying attention, the beginning of that is like, and then he gets to the pie, like, oh wait, not tasty anymore. Never mind. So
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Better than before. I'm just saying, like, they probably now taste much better than they did alive.
That's a good point. What's that meme with the girl that's like, So note how the wines are red, gold, and purple, not to mention yellow and black beer. But of all the ones he cites in his quote, he says, wash it down with Arbor Gold. Name it by name. Wash down that lie of a pie. So part of the revenge here is the death of Wendell at the Red Wedding. That's a major thing because his son was killed in another event that was supposed to be, just a party. But thanks to the Freys and Boltons, his other son Willis was forced into cannibalism while a captive at Harrenhal, forced to eat Vargo Hoat. So there's some vindictiveness on this, apart from the revenge. It's very specific. And really, there's almost not a lot to say about it other to point it out and say, look, this is one of the hugest plots. And, well, by now we've gone through so many examples of Arbor Gold, it almost sells itself. It's like, well, he is selling this lie that this food is what it is, but really it's human flesh. Whoa.
Yeah. Lies in Arbor Gold is not like one of the threefold things that Anne Grohl has kind of told us about, his editor, saying he likes to do the threefold punch. This is not one of them. This is just meta that he's been building in over time. And I mean, he discovered after the first 3 books, I like playing with wine as symbolism for political dealings. And then he started going hard, being like, what if a specific wine meant treachery? And now here we are. And this was supposed to be such a big, just a George waving a flag, being like, do you guys get it yet? Don't get it?
Yep. Yeah. So Wyman Manderly certainly shoving it down their throats. And that's another one. I wonder where that's going to go. But I feel like the rest of this plot line probably won't involve much feasting and drinking now that all the swords have been drawn and Wyman's neck has been cut and the men are out in the field. But certainly it was set up nicely by a little bit of Arbor Gold. Next, we have Leo's and Arbor Blackmail, blackmail is another form of deception, clearly. And I don't think we've dealt with blackmail yet amongst our examples. Maybe we've touched on a little bit, but this is more straightforward, even though it's sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's not entirely serious, but even within that non-seriousness, there's some analysis to be done. Here we go with Leo Tyrell and the A Feast for Crows prologue.
Buy me a cup of Arbor Gold, Hop Frog, and perhaps I won't inform my father of your toast. The tiles turned against me at the checkered hazard, and I wasted my last stag on supper. Suckling pig and plum sauce stuffed with chestnuts and white truffles. A man must eat. What did you lads have?
He's such a jerk. A man must eat. He's like, oh, it wasn't very good, but, you got to eat something. What did you guys have? So, also interestingly, Leo Tyrell is the only golden-haired Tyrell I know of. There are certainly some that have married into the family, and maybe I'm missing one, but I think that's maybe of note. Now, he's got expectation of special treatment, even though he's a maester or maester in training, and they're supposed to forget their families. He's a rather strong example of how that's kind of a shared delusion, too. How, yeah, even though maesters and septons like Lucy and Frey turn up in places without their last names, well, as Cersei says, these connections still linger, even when officially they're forgotten. So he's being a jerk in a number of ways here, pointing out that these guys don't have the money to afford these things, and obviously by asking for this guy to buy him a glass of Arbor Gold, which he probably can't even afford, he's just making them seem small. So it's an example of Arbor Gold being used as sort of a bludgeon of class, but also the blackmail thing, even though it's not very serious. I don't know that there's a whole lot to say about this one. It's kind of a minor example, but maybe because Leo Tyrell will turn out to be more important. We've just gotten this character introduced, and maybe he won't do much, but maybe he'll actually be somewhat important, and we'll look back on this scene later with, what do you have? Do you have anything to say about this scene, Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, at worst, if we don't look back with some sort of beautiful, profound clarity, we're at least going to get a great death scene of his little bitch ass dying, and that's all that matters.
Yes, well said. Okay. Well, we have a couple more comments here from A. Crisp. Once the Citadel is gone, along with the Winterfell Library, is the next best book collection at Castle Black? Because if so, yeesh. Yeah, I'm sure there's some castles here and there that have some libraries. If Winterfell has a library, then surely, like, Casterly Rock has a library, but still, I mean, of course, Winterfell's was pretty much burned. But if Oldtown is destroyed and the Citadel, the idea of learning and knowledge being destroyed in Westeros is an uncomfortable thing that we likely have coming. Is that kind of how you see it too?
Jade Compendium's at the wall, so that's great. And Dany has that great book collection, right? Chekhov's book collection, and Tyrion, I think, has a good book collection, but that's going to be our source.
I guess we saw some with Arianne when she was in the tower, but she didn't
once she ignored, right? Yeah,
exactly. We're like, dude, you've got all these books. Why are you bored?
There was a Dance of the Dragons book right there, and she didn't read it.
I know. It's the biggest tragedy of the whole series. No. Super chat from Will Carter. Hey, Big Will. He says, just a little something to you and yours toward your next bottle or other recreational accoutrement or choice for all the outstanding work you do in always providing the most thoroughly and thoughtfully expressed content. Big love. Well, that was really well said, Will, not just because it's so flattering, but that was like some great verbiage. Thanks, Will. We appreciate it. Will is the man who's hooked us up with some places to stay when we're in Nashville for 2 different Con of Thrones that has happened. So big supporter of content creators. He hooked Tony up with a room. He hooked a bunch of people up with rooms. So I can't even remember it all because I'm half a bottle deep here. But thanks very much, Will. We appreciate the shout out and the love and the money. Next up, we have Death and Arbor Gold. Here is the only clear example of Arbor Gold used as an assassination, though there's certainly other ones that we suspect. But this is outright. This is very much clear. Ulf the White was a dragon seed, one of the men who tried to ride a dragon later in the Dance of Dragons when there was a call for such to ride the wild or formerly ridden dragons. In this case, Ulf the White got Silverwing, Alysanne's dragon. So that is a notable dragon. Of course, Alysanne had been dead for more than 30 years by this time, but still Silverwing was around. He's one of the 2 betrayers. The first was Hugh Hammer. Hugh Hammer was more outspoken, more charismatic, more powerful of the 2, but he was killed while Ulf was sleeping. This is amazing. Ulf was such a drunk. He probably had Robert beat. He was such a drunk that he slept through the same vicious, incredibly bloody battle that Hard Hugh was killed in. And, well, what does it say about a ruler or a potential ruler if they sleep through bloody battles? It doesn't say good things, does it? Here's the quote.
And though Hard Hugh Hammer had died and his dreams of kingship with him, the second betrayer remained. Ulf White had woken from his drunken sleep to find himself the last dragon rider and possessed of the last dragon.
The hammer's dead, and your boy as well.
He is purported to have told Lord Peake.
All you got left is me.
When Lord Peake asked him his intentions, White replied,
We march, just how you wanted. You take the city, I'll take the bloody throne. How's that?
The next morning, Sir Hobart Hightower called upon him to thrash out the details of their assault upon King's Landing. He brought with him 2 casks of wine as a gift, one of Dornish Red, one of Arbor Gold. Though Ulf the Sot had never tasted a wine he did not like, he was known to be partial to sweeter vintages. No doubt Sir Hobart hoped to sip the sour red while Lord Ulf quaffed down the Arbor Gold, yet something about Hightower's manner, he was sweating and stammering and too hearty by half, the squire who served them testified later, pricked White's suspicions. Interesting, just interesting stuff.
It just happens to be a Hightower.
Weary, He commanded that the Dornish red be set aside for later and insisted Sir Hobart share the Arbor Gold with him. History has little good to say about Sir Hobart Hightower, but no man can question the manner of his death. Rather than betray his fellow caltrops, he let the squire fill his cup, drank deep, and asked for more. Once he saw Hightower drink, Ulf the Sot lived up to his name, putting down 3 cups before he began to yawn. The poison in the wine was a gentle one.
Death of a would-be monarch, shades of Joffrey and Aegon II, as you mentioned very skillfully. Though these are different wines and different people, still, it's another example of poison in wine ending someone's life. And assassination through wine is apparently something we've seen a few times, and it makes sense. I mean, everyone drinks. Not everyone drinks alcohol, but everyone drinks. I mean, everyone has to drink, whether it's alcohol or not.
Not as safe to drink as alcohol is, right? Like, alcohol is cleaner to drink for them than water. I think that's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I drink it that way, but that's not how it actually is for me, right?
That's a really good point. Yeah, like, alcohol was one of the most trustworthy beverages, even if it was just watered wine, because alcohol is a surefire way of killing bacteria. And back in the day, and I mean, when I mean back in the day, I mean like not that long ago in human history. I mean like less than 100 years ago. Or like roughly
cities
something
right
like
now
that.
Probably drink like that because they don't have water because of resources that are being held by people hoarding them who are rich. Anyways,
no, you're right. But it still does happen in the world. And when I say 100 years ago, I'm only talking about the U.S. But you're right. In other places, it is still happening.
It's still a big deal, and it's interesting that George once more had a poisoning of a monarch. Like you said, death of a would-be monarch. Look at Aegon II. Aegon II wins, but for how long? Not very long. And I just think that's such an interesting thought as George fleshed it out in Fire and Blood, because this was initially something that appeared in Princess and the Queen, right? Like, before Fire and Blood, George had these casks of Arbor Gold arranged in the Princess and the Queen side story. So he obviously was playing with it even then, and he wanted to flesh the story of this betrayal out. And I'm interested to see what's about to happen in the real story that's similar to this.
Yeah, right. Is some other dragon rider going to get poisoned? I mean, it's not like we have a lot of different dragon rider candidates out there, do we?
Uh-huh.
And it's also really interesting to think about how this speaks to Westerosi morals and cultural values in terms of like facing your opponents. We see very often the line, "Oh, poison is a woman's weapon or a weapon of the Dornish." Yet here we are having like these noble lords agreeing to poison a dragon rider, and that's in part because, well, I don't know why. Like, why couldn't Hobart just stab the dude? Like, he could have easily killed Ulf. This guy's a drunk. Just wait for him to pass out and then stab him. You didn't have to poison him. But still, it's interesting that they went that route. That's part of what makes this anecdote interesting, and like you say, maybe gives us the sense that it's predictive, that it's telling us a story that we haven't seen yet in The Winds of Winter, or maybe even more likely, The Dream of Spring. This might be the kind of thing that comes near the end, or towards the end, when people are settling the politics, when the wars are winding down. But how else? I mean, you can't fight a dragon rider in battle. Like, that is normally how Westerosi knighthood and chivalric values would say you're supposed to defeat a foe in the field, not with subterfuge. But when they're a dragon rider, the whole calculus is changed, and all of a sudden these so-called masculine ideals of facing your enemies in the field are changed, because actually you feel the same way when your opponent is someone you literally cannot beat in the field. You might look for other methods too. So all of a sudden, it's a woman's weapon has a much different connotation, doesn't it?
Especially because it's more that women are used as the vehicle by men for their bidding. You know, like,
yes.
Liza Arryn didn't get the idea of poison on her own. Like, that's the whole point of the plot.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Sansa, same thing, a vehicle. So more often than not, it's a woman being used as a vehicle for poison.
Well said. So now we have our final regular section. We have an outro section with some miscellaneous mentions and some comparisons to other drinks. But here's our last Arbor Gold example, Lies and His Arbor Gold. All sorts of deceptions surrounding this plot line and scene. As many have noted, the plotting and playing of the Game of Thrones out in Slaver's Bay is meant to be a parallel to the same things happening in Westeros, just with a different cultural context. Hisdar is a puppet It's notable that even in Slaver's Bay, these ultra-rich types are drinking wine from Westeros. Let's have another quote.
Are you proud of that, by the way? Lies in his Arbor Gold? Do you feel really good about
that? Better than normal, because now I'm 2/3 of the bottle deep.
Can I just say, Aziz came up to me and he was like so proud. He was like, "There's so many puns in this," and he just read them all out loud to me. And I was like, "You gotta like save them a little bit."
I tweeted a bunch of them out too.
You need to like tell me one and then tell me another one an hour later, so you get all maximum laughs.
Aziz, darling, I think you did great. Don't listen to her. I'm just kidding, Ashaya. Listen to Ashaya a little bit, okay? Just a little.
Okay.
You know, not about high towers, but maybe about puns. I don't know. God. Some of the time, most of the time, who knows? Okay, let's do this quote. The king crossed to the sideboard to pour himself a cup of wine, but only a trickle remained in the bottom of the flagon. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Miklas, wine, at once."
"Yes, your worship."
"Take Drakaz with you, 1 flagon of Arbor Gold and 1 of that sweet red. None of our yellow piss, thank you. And the next time I find my flagon dry, I may have to take a switch to those pretty pink cheeks of yours." The boy went running off, and the king turned back to Selmy. "I dreamed you found Daenerys."
"Dreams can lie, your grace."
"Your radiance would serve. What brings you to me at this hour, sir? Some trouble in the city?"
"The city is tranquil."
"Is it so?" Hisdar looked confused. "Why have you come?"
"To ask a question. Magnificence, are you the harpy?"
Hisdar's wine cup slipped through his fingers, bounced off the carpet, rolled. This felt like ad-libs. Did that feel like ad-libs? Oh my
God. So no wine is actually consumed in the scene, to be clear. It arrives just as the dragons are seen to be loose. So it shows up by the end of the chapter, but by then they've just noticed that, oh my God, Dany's dragons have escaped, and that is distracting. But it was clearly consumed prior, as there's an empty flagon, and he wants it refilled. And that is a nice symbolic representation of everything that's gone on in Meereen up to this point, with Hisdar being a puppet ruler, the Shave Pate, and the Green Grace, and so many other, the Harpy, just all these other political angles and players and power centers and people who have their different ambitions coming together and coalescing. As I said, the Game of Thrones is playing out in Slaver's Bay. And you have some really good takes here as well, Chloe. So let me turn it over to you.
All right. I think there's something here. This is Kingbreaker, right? There's something really interesting here going on. And it's actually something I didn't realize, but is already set up from the Arbor Gold in Dany 8 at the feast before the pits open. We get this line. "Wine flowed, not the thin, pale stuff of Slaver's Bay, but rich, sweet vintages from the Arbor and dream wine from Karth, flavored with strange spices. The young Kai had come at King Hisdar's invitation to sign the peace and witness the rebirth of Meereen's far-famed fighting pits. Her noble husband had opened the Great Pyramid to fet them. I hate this, thought Daenerys Targaryen. How did this happen that I am drinking and smiling with men I'd sooner flay?"
Awareness, yes.
Yes, there's definitely something really similar and dissimilar from Cersei in this chapter. It makes sense with their initial chapters, right? Before Feast and Dance were split, when they were initially the first book, their chapters were kind of meant to juxtapose the others and contrast each other and seeing their differences in rule, and kind of heavy is the crown and what goes on with the floppy ears. Here they are drinking the finest wine of the Arbor amongst fools, both of them. And if wine is indicative to capital and trade, that's exceptionally interesting. Hisdar traces his noble Giscari lineage from several different men from the past, and he's using his now wealth, pretty extreme wealth, to perpetuate political deals with the Yunkai. It's kind of akin to Littlefinger's shady work in the Vale, right? Like learning Lyn Corbray is actually one of his, as Hisdar is likely working with the Yunkish here. The framework even then shows kind of that conspiracy leaking underneath. Whether or not he's the Harpy is not even part of the question. He's definitely conspiring. Yes. And when he allows him to take 1 flagon of Arbor Gold, it almost reads as an inventory count to me. Because this is literally liquid gold, right? And it's the best for entertaining and coaxing deals out of people, as we've seen throughout the text. So it's almost like, and especially as we've been discussing that the production of Arbor Gold may be disrupted very soon, Arbor Gold might be pretty important.
Yeah, really, really well said. That's great stuff. I like the symbolism of the wine cup falling. It's maybe, I think of it like the jig is up, like he realizes that they're onto him, or at least that, well, Barristan is onto him, or Barristan is at least on the right track. But since it's his wine we're dealing with, we could say the jug is up, or maybe it's down because it's on the floor. The jug is down. Let's make that trend. The jug is down. That's the new way to say this. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, actually. It's not going to trend, but I can try. Super chat from Silas Toms says, hey, it's my favorite host. Don't tell Eliana. I don't think we can conceal that from her. We have to tell her everything. But thank you, Silas. Silas is the linchpin, the connecting point between some of the Lovecraft fandom that is the Lovecraft fandom within the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. Not only have I done a panel at Con with your man, Emmett Booth, shout out Not a Cast. Excellent work they do over there.
As
I did a Lovecraft panel with him, and Silas did a Lovecraft panel with him as well. So he's the connector.
I heard that somebody actually put that Lovecraft panel together specifically to make sure they could do it. I don't know who did that, but they seem pretty smart.
Is this a connection to you? Is it someone who happens to do a lot of management at Ice and Fire Con?
No, I didn't talk about it up top, but yes, I do a lot of the marketing and some of the programming choices for Ice and Fire Con, and I work pretty closely with the con chair and other people on the small council. And yes, that was fun. We got to arrange that. I was like, we really need that, and Silas is really good at it. Emmett's really into that, so it was a perfect pairing, a perfect little affair they got to have, and it was fun. It was a great panel.
It was.
And we actually just very recently talked about Silas on our podcast during the Jamie chapters when he has Joanna dream, right, of his mother.
Okay, I can't with that one.
Joanna.
Well, I wanted to bring his fun tinfoil in. Silas has a great theory that is a little bit tinfoily of Joanna being alive. It leads to actually Joanna being Quaithe, which I do not agree with. However, I think there are some really great meta examples about masks and stars and disappearing characters. So it's fun. You should definitely check out his blog, Gods of Terror.
Yes, I agree. And I was one of the people in the front row of, well, not the one I did with him, or with Emmett, because I was, on the panel. But with Silas and Emmett, I was in the front row going, oh, several times. And one of the anecdotes they went over in that in their panel, I've repeated a couple times and cited because I think it's so, so cool. And they got me to read the story associated with it. Good job, y'all. Good job. Okay, so now we have our final section. It just doesn't have a punny title. It's just other random mentions of Arbor Gold and then a few other related beverage discussions that are connected. Davos only thinks of Arbor Gold once briefly. He thinks of a beer so good they can match Arbor Gold in price overseas in Bravos or Ibn, and that's it. Because, Arbor Gold is not really a match for Davos chapters. The guy is very honest and straightforward. And I'm sure George, with his creativity, could make that work, but I can see why. He's a common-born guy, so he's not down for fancy wines. He's more of a, cheap wine beer kind of guy.
Yeah, I feel like Ibonese liquor, I bet they have a thick, weird liquor in Ib.
It's true. They're
Ib liquor.
Ib liquor. That's what they call it.
All right, no more of that. What is that?
That strange sound, yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I meant to... I was trying to turn myself up, and I turned Aziz way up, and I almost blew my own ears out. It was terrible.
Oh.
I was just trying to say a joke, which was that the Ibonese clearly had some sort of mare's milk, kind of giant's milk thing.
Because they're so large. Yeah, they're larger.
Fermented milk is what I picture for them.
Yeah, thick, really gross thick. Have you ever had a pudding shot, Aziz?
No.
Don't. It's a texture thing for me. I love pudding and I like the idea, but in actual execution, I'm just why is this so thick?
Yeah. So at the beginning of the episode, we talked about citing examples where it seems to be Arbor Gold, but isn't explicitly stated to be. And so I wanted to present one example that I think is a good candidate for that to set up and help y'all maybe find other examples in the future, sort of to set the stage for that. This comes during Joffrey's gift-giving scene. I don't really need to read the whole quote. I don't think we need to bother with that. But the point is that they're giving Joffrey all his gifts. And this is, of course, kind of like the wedding, it's a big farce because obviously everybody knows Joffrey is horrible, even the people giving him gifts. But it's a shared delusion, and Tyrion is drinking the whole way through. This is one of the drunkest we ever see Tyrion, that's saying something. This is a Sansa chapter, and she's noticing how much he's drinking because Sansa's pretty observant. She's a great POV for that reason. Being observant makes for a good POV. And she thinks about it. She notices how much he's drinking, and she's afraid because Joffrey keeps trying to antagonize Tyrion, but and she's afraid of his reaction. She's like, uh-oh, what's he going to say here? Which is understandable because Joffrey's saying awful things to Tyrion and mocking him and making fun of him. But Tyrion just keeps drinking. He just keeps pouring wine down his gullet instead of responding. So he's kind of like going along with it. He's doing his best, but of course, eventually he breaks a little and says, and this is when we have the confrontation in quotes, that is, of Tyrion bringing up the Valyrian steel dagger in mixed company to accuse him sort of tongue-in-cheek of murdering Bran or trying to murder Bran. And he says, yes, a dagger to match my sword, a gold hilt with rubies in it. Dragon bone is too plain. As you wish, your grace. Tyrion drank another cup of wine. So this is just constant wine drinking in this scene. So it's a good example of Tyrion. Never once is Arbor Gold mentioned, but Tyrion probably drinks 5 to 10 cups of it throughout this scene, and it really sets the stage. So it's a good example of this happening without us necessarily seeing it. It's not always clear that Arbor Gold is happening. And you've got an example of similar status, meaning that it's pretty clearly Arbor Gold, but at no point is it actually mentioned. And I love this one because I completely missed this. So I'm really happy you pulled it here, Chloe.
Yes, and to piggyback off your Joffrey, I mean, it has to be Arbor Gold. It's literally a wedding to the Tyrells, you know?
Yeah, what else would they serve? They're not going to stint. Yeah.
I mean, they have to serve lies and Arbor Gold at this wedding. That's like the whole entire thing. That's like where it comes from. It's a whole thing. Read the books. I'm just kidding.
I will. Good idea.
Check them out, Aziz. I hear they're based on a show. So in the Hedge Night, we actually have a reference to Arbor Gold. Dunk is offered a cup of golden wine by Ryman Fossaway. Ryman Fossaway discusses a bunch of lies that people tell about certain important people in this story, and then gives his truth, what he thinks, which ends up being correct. He talks about Darren the Dreamer's disappearance, where everybody thinks Darren was kidnapped by these robbers, but Ryman's like, he's probably just off getting drunk, which, okay, well, kind of. Dragon dreams and drunk, that's pretty much what's happening. Aerion is being called a prince, and Ryman is like, oh yeah, people think he's a prince, but he's a total monster. And he estimates that Aerion's mad at Lord Ashford about his horse going to Lord Humphrey, but his uncle, Aerion's uncle, is probably the true culprit, which he was. And then, finally, this foray of Arbor Gold ends when Egg comes crying to Dunk to save the puppeteer from Aerion, who then imprisons Dunk while he's on these lies in Arbor Gold.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's not the only time. I think we hear it in Sworn Sword as well. But to pull up something from Mystery Night, Dunk turned the wine cup in his hands, frowning. It was solid silver with a line of golden snails inlaid around the lip. The wine was gold as well and heady on the tongue. If wishes were fish's eye, I'd pay. Only you don't have 2 stags to lock horns. So this is when Dunk was trying to get his things back, ransom all of his items back, and Sir Uther is treating Dunk really dishonestly while Dunk is drinking lies in Arbor Gold from him because he wants his stuff back, and Uther's like, I'm gonna upcharge you times 10. Haha. Really smart.
That is really good. That's a great catch, in part because too, it's the snail is really trying to seem honest. He's like, look, let me tell you the real story of how tournaments work. Meanwhile, he's talking about how he scams them on on the regular by tricks by losing on purpose or bribing the guy who makes the matches, things like that. So I think this is a really good catch because also it's like I said, Dunk, born in Flea Bottom. He would maybe have heard of Arbor Gold, but he certainly wouldn't have had much of it, if ever had it at all, and he wouldn't know it by taste. So it would be unauthentic for George to declare that this is Arbor Gold. I mean, maybe he could have the character of the snail mention, oh, by the way, I'm serving you Arbor Gold. but it could come up organically. But if he just mentions it every time, then that becomes a little too obvious. It kind of
boring.
Yeah, it's boring. Yeah,
overdone.
right.
It's overdone.
Yeah, overdone. So it's better to have it sneak in there. Partly because George is a man who wrote A Song of Ice and Fire to be reread. So if he makes everything too obvious or too clear, then we have less reason to reread. And we know that rereading provides enormous value. And this is just one little example of that, and how George doesn't just spell it all out. There are other beverages that occasionally come up, and some might have value in doing research on. I haven't looked up much about Hippocras, except for Chloe wrote Roose is loose here. Yes, Roose notably drinks Hippocras at Highgarden during the scene where he has dinner with Jaime and Brienne, and a lot of at Harrenhal. Yeah, so that's a great example. And Hippocras comes up a few other places, but it's never, I don't know that it comes up often enough to have a pattern to it, but it might. It's super sweet, which, given the sweetness of Arbor Gold being a theme of swallowing sweet lies, that might apply. Do you have anything to say about Hippocras, or is it just kind of a topic that maybe...
super sweet, heavy. It's like almost like a cognac or something. Like, you know what I'm trying to, like a brandy almost. It's like thicker and sweeter. I don't know. It's not for me. It's not for anyone except Roose Bolton. I feel like it's heavier. It's definitely heavier. Like, Roose is the kind of guy that's like, I can drink you all under the table, but I don't want to embarrass you, so I'm gonna drink this Hippocras.
Standard Bolton. We also have the fearsomely strong cider at the Quill and Tankard in Oldtown, of course. Aemon has had it, he thinks of it, and then we have it in A Feast for Crows in the opening scene, the prologue there with Pate and Alaris and all those guys, Mollander and that gang. They're having the fearsomely strong cider, which notably the line that you never want to see if you hope a place, if you like something, which is, this inn had stood for 600 years and will probably stand for 600 more. No, I don't think it will stand for 600 more. It may not stand for one more. And the reason for that is our final topic, Euron. He has very little to do with Arbor Gold directly, but he has some meta surrounding it. Certainly Conquest of the Arbor. The jug is down when Euron takes the Arbor. Does this mean the lies will stop? Does this mean Westeros has to face more brutal truths? Does this mean... I don't know. Do you have anything to say about Euron and the Conquest of the Arbor, and does that apply here?
I love the idea of Shade of the Evening that we're about to talk about a little more in depth with Euron. I think that that's a great thing to pinpoint in this discussion of bringing this like nega idea of Euron drinking this like anti-weirwood. It's the exact inverse of the weirwood, right? The colors are inverse. They're black and blue, the tree that the leaves are ground up and created this nightshade out of. And it's liquid LSD. I mean, we're all adults here, hopefully, unless those 5-year-olds that we were talking about are still listening. I worry about those kids, you know what I mean? But it's LSD. It's liquid LSD. You're going to trip your balls off and see things and be taken to all these different dimensions. And Euron lost the ability. He fell, right? He tried to fly and he fell, and he was not good enough to be the next apprentice, as poor Quentin has so eloquently put in some of his Euron stuff. And he takes drugs now to recreate what Bran can do almost naturally, right? Like not counting eating his friend and all that jazz. Behind the scenes, different kind of Arbor Gold. But Euron drinks his own version of Arbor Gold to give himself these superpowers. And I think those trees, that black and blue, in contrast to the weirwood, is also in contrast to gold, right? It's a big contrast in the idea of this sparkly, light, bubbly gold.
Yeah, and it's also framed really interestingly in the same scene where they're talking about the Arbor. Yeah, the Arbor's got grapes. Let's attack the Arbor. When Euron's trying to get them to go east to take the dragons, and he's like, yeah, I see. This is what they're more focused on. I'm going to have to do some manipulating to get them to go my way. And immediately after that scene, Euron flees from the crowd and decides it's better to manipulate Victarion one-on-one rather than with a crowd around him, because Victarion's easy to manipulate, but the crowd is smarter than Victarion. So let's remove them from the equation. And he offers him the wine of the Warlocks, which he turns down after spitting it out. But it's you can see what's trying to happen here. He's trying to get Victarion to face these brutal truths rather than these sweet lies. However, even in me calling them brutal truths, he's using them to deceive, just like the Undying Ones did to Dany. They had her drink some shade of the evening, and then they used that as a means to look at this truth. Meanwhile, we're gonna pull this move on you. It's like, this crystal ball tells truth, and it does, but meanwhile, while you're mesmerized by these truths, I'm drawing a dagger, planning on stabbing you in the back. So even when Euron is using truth, he's using it to deceive, I think, just like these Undying Ones did. So that's something to be wary of, because Euron, even when he's dealing with truth, he's using it as a means to his own ends. I think that's a pretty straightforward statement about that guy.
You know, when you think about it, and I won't do any spoilers here, so if you haven't read The Forsaken, the Winds of Winter sample chapter, not that I would ever say you should read something that's not technically published, but if you find in your heart that you want to read it, it is a wild ride. And there's some stuff to even look at with how Euron uses Shade of the Evening there. It's very much used as a political barter, just like what we talked about with the lies in Arbor Gold and with the wine being used as a barter. He tries to use it for control over other people. We'll see that go on in Euron's plot throughout the books, I'm guessing. And I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll see Euron doing Shade of the Evening.
No, I have to agree with you there. And yeah, I think we do talk about The Forsaken a lot, so I think it is safe enough. And yeah, the whole idea of bribing people with this sweet wine versus what Euron does, by forcing people to drink this awful substance, is so very opposed conceptually and thematically that it just fits so very, very well. So that is it for today. We hit our target almost exactly with about 2 hours, but we have a couple of outro things to handle here. And one last quote that I think sums it up quite well, because this is not done yet. We are sure to have more Arbor Gold mentions, and I think you all are pretty well prepared for that now. If you've heard this episode, you've heard Chloe's great takes, you've heard our research, I think you are very well armed for this plot line going forward. So here is the final quote of the episode. As we started with Sansa, so shall we end with her. "Trust no one, I once told Eddard Stark, but he would not listen. You are Elaine, and you must be Elaine all the time."
He put 2 fingers on her left breast.
Yeah, why did I have to? I'm sorry that you had to read just that one line there. We cited that at the time we did the chapters, like, God damn, why did he's so creepy. So even now he's distracting us from our point.
We're having fun.
Yeah. "Even here in your heart, can you do that? Can you be my daughter in your heart?"
I do not know, my lord, she almost said, but that was not what he wanted to hear. Lies in Arbor Gold, she thought. "I am Elaine, father. Who else would I be?"
Yeah, Sansa
There's
knows.
your lie. There's your lie in Arbor Gold, because she thinks about it consistently through Feast. She's like, I'm not your daughter, you freaking gross creep.
And he thinks she does. He thinks she's totally bought in. He thinks everything he's doing is working. He's like, oh, Sansa likes me. It's all working. She's going to fall for me. Oh, no. Oh, no. No. Sorry, Littlefinger. One of your schemes is finally going to backfire spectacularly. And she knows what to look out for. She knows his game. She's figuring it out, even if he doesn't know she's figuring it out. And now you all know, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thanks for the live viewers. Thanks to those of you who listen afterwards. Thank you very much, Chloe. You had some incredible takes today. You added so much to this topic. I think this would have been a shade of what it was without your input. What else do you have going on? I know we talked about this at the beginning, but let's repeat that in case people forgot.
Thank you so much again for having me on. I miss you guys so much. This was nice. It was almost like the real deal. I know that we will be together soon enough after all this craziness going on with this pandemic. But
cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Absolutely. Lies in Arbor Gold to that. Definitely check out Girls Gone Canon.
Yes.
We are hosted on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean is where we're actually main hosted, Google Play, all sorts, pretty much anywhere you can find us. Our Patreon is patreon.com/girlsgonecanon. We are reading A Song of Ice and Fire, point of view by point of view character. So all of the point of view chapters at once for each character, and also his dark materials. We are covering all of his dark materials, inner books, outer books as we go. And stay tuned for some really big stuff happening there. We have some exciting things for patrons coming up soon. I'm not allowed to say things about it. Eliana is in the chat, as we've learned. If the mods tell you,
Hi,
but I can't. And personally, I'm working on an essay about King's Landing, about a theory about Myrcella and what the Dornish are about to do in King's Landing and what's going to go down. Spoiler alert, it's King's Landing. So... Sack of King's Landing.
They're not throwing her a party.
Would you say that Chloe, that Eliana has you under an NDA?
I would say it, but that would be illegal for me to say to you, Ashea.
She can't even say whether or not. So yes, I echo everything Chloe said. They have a great show over there with Girls Gone Canon, and I actually this is a good thing to ask. What POVs have you finished? If you can maybe do that by memory. Maybe that's not.
Yes, no, I can do this. I'm ready. Okay. Eddard Stark was our first POV.
Cool.
Barristan, Quentin, Arianne, Sansa. Sansa went to Theon, Theon to Jon, Jon to Jaime, Jaime to Aerys, Aerys to the next POV that I'm not going to tell you. Nice try. And we have covered the Winds of Winter chapters for those that have Winds of Winter chapters published as well over on our Patreon.
That is awesome. That's a long list. See, y'all, if you haven't checked out Girls Gone Canon, that's a lot for y'all to dive into. So cheers to them. Raise your glasses to Girls Gone Canon and Drunk a Song of Ice and Fire History. Thank you again, Chloe. Also, shout out to Apple Martini. Cheers to you, Butterbumps, Dr. Pepper, Lady M. Y'all got me started on this topic. And you can check out the original thread on Westeros.org. It's called Lies in Arbor Gold. Well, look what we found. And it was back in 2013, and you'll even find a few of my posts in there. But frankly, they covered it. My contributions were minor. It was really all them, and I hope we treated the subject well here today. Thanks to everyone who showed up. Thanks to y'all who came live, watched live, and asked questions, and joined the chat to have a good time. Whether you joined us in the drinking part or not, thanks either way. Thanks to Ashea for handling so much at once. Thanks also to Chloe for the quotes. Besides the great takes, there was the excellent quote reading.
Yeah, I have to give an extra thanks for that because it really makes it a lot easier for me.
Yes.
I wish we had, like, Sean still living here. I could just be like, Sean, sit there and read quotes.
She does this every Sunday for Valerie Reedus, reads the quotes while also doing all this other stuff, so... Again,
Yay,
toast to Ashea.
Toast to Ashea, though. Let's be real. Ashea has put in the work, and I would gladly take the quotes for you, Ashea.
Yes. And also thanks to Claradox, Michael Klarfeld for the wonderful map sitting behind me, Kevin McLeod for the Valar Reredis music. Thanks to Joey Townsend and Jesse Kowal for our regular History of Westeros music. Thanks to our Bengineer for working on our sound quality. And we've got some patrons to shout out as we do our outro. Thanks again, everybody. Stick with us for the patrons or dip if you're ready to go. But these names are fun. Lord Mark of House Joseph is the Snow and Winterfell, rider of Mazalacartho, a white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and talons. Our peers of the realm include the mysterious BR, Hand of the King, Lord Stephen Stark, titles, Hand of Queen Shea, who is known as the best. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog is Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad, Warden of the East. Cabeth the Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks, and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods, and Warden of the North. Lord Brendan Lannister is the Blood Lion, ruler of Castle Everroar, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle, King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, is commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by flagship Caraxes, and the Bloodstone Fleet led by flagship Prince Daemon. Our king beyond the wall is Sidney Jesse, the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring and the Haunted Forest, wields a dagger of dragonglass and the Valyrian steel blade, Red Frost. Neither of them fall victim to lies or Arbor Gold. They're made of sterner stuff. Lady Sarah Connolly the Willful is wit beyond measure, is man's greatest treasure. She's Jenny's patron. Our White Walker patrons include Araya Flint of the Mountain Flints, captured by the Weeper, only to be raised in the Valley of the Milkwater, Blue Eyes, and Golden Memories. Alexander Greyblood is Fist of the First Men, now crowned in ice, called Silencebringer, Woodblinder, and the Snow of Night, wielder of the ice-forged greatsword Pale Frost. Our small council includes Lord Daniel, the Sneaky Russian, Master of Ships, Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Laura Boros, the Lady of Infinity, Master of Coin, Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whisperers. Our lords and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron, Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell, Breaker of the Second Stone, Gregor of the Toasty, Lord of the Bread Fort, Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass, Ashlyn Winter is the Hawkseye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny, Guardian Ranger of the Hidden 100-Acre Werewood, dual wielder of Valyrian Short Swords Glorious Warning and Little Light Wise, is sharpshooter of the Werewood and Ironbow Laminated Longbow Todd Von Oben. When you fear things cannot get worse, Snugglebunny enters the fray. The Bastard of Wolfswood is first forester of the Old Gods, sworn to House Ironwood. Listen for the silence. Lady Lyanna Kelly of Wolf Island is protectress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Lady Raywyn of House Dillsdane is the Starspear. Congrats on your little bean. Peter Rivers is the Pale Dragon and heir to Bloodraven. Lady Carlin Carey of Castle Stonesharp, whose horse is shod in Valyrian steel, is Lady Ryder of the Rising Hills. Lady Mora of House Stark is Archmistress of Apothecaries and Woods Witch. Her castle features werewood doors with painted moons. Charlie 1-1 of the Desert Stormborn is the Straight and Stalwart, Lord of Castle Bradley, Guardian of the Giant Stair, Defender of the Skirling Pass, Keeper of the High Ground, Wielder of the Werewood Staff Concussion. King's Justice is Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian Steelblade Fate. I really feel like I'm slurring a little bit. Queen's High Council is Rebea Stareyes, Lady of the Waves and Mistress of Ships, Captain of the Iron Shadowcat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Katrin the Wise of House Trondheim is Master of Coin. Grand Archmaester Renny, whose rod and ring and mask are not gold, but quartz crystal, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Pen, Fire and Ink. Lady Tracy the Ascendant is ruler of the Cloud Keep, Master of Laws. The Purple Lord, Leo Anansi, is Master of Whisperers. Our King's Guard includes Lord Commander Namian of House Darkland, the Night Slayer, Valyrian Sword, Onyx Abyss is his. Sir Dean the White is Knight of the Black Star. Sir Gregor Snow, called Snowbear, is a Bastard of Winterfell. Vaughn of House Firster is Sigil is a mailed fist with extended forefinger and pinky on light blue field. Visenya let us hold Dark Sister once. Sir Bateman is the Dark Knight. Sir Roland de Stark is Gunslinger Knight of the Winter Kings, back from a 20-year ranging to the lands of Always Winter to protect my King Aziz. Thanks for that. I do need defense from time to time. Our Queen's Guard includes Lord Captain Commander Haima Helminth, the Celt Sword Sentinel, and Captain of the New Dad podcast. Alexander of House Atreides from Seat of Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Sir Rambo is the Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Sir Leon, not Sir Neon, of House Walker is wielder of the twin Valyrian steel blades Fire and Ice and the Werewood Bow Rain. Amber the Adamant is the Knight of the Mist and Mother of Squids. The Wintry Wolverine motto, we finish what you begin, and Nora Neko. Our Beard Guard is led by Lord Commander George the Golden, backed by Sir Joshua Oakhart the White Oak. Lady Rita of the Coppermane.
You are really struggling.
Yeah, the Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, is Dance the Fervor. I'll get through it. Sir Jeff, Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, is the multifaceted beard of platinum, red, and brown. Stay frosty. Yeah, he is the beard. He doesn't have the beard. He is it. Sir Tim Corgyle is Mad Boy of the Western Desert. Last but not least, the History of Westeros Night's Watch, which is led by... Scrolling. Lord Commander Richard the Ligerheart, wielder of Barry's Anklebreaker, a flail with blue and silver Valyrian steel spikes, motto, Go Blue. Backed by First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire and the Snow, First Ranger Liam, a.k.a. Sir, waiting on a nickname, and First Steward Sir Jurion of the Torrentine, called Pale Wind. Thanks again, everybody. We really appreciate the support. We really appreciate everyone who came live and everyone who listens afterwards. Extra, double, triple, infinite appreciation to Chloe for all her excellent readings of quotes and incredible takes for this episode and wading through all these Patreon shoutouts. And
Always.
I'm sorry?
Always.
Always, yeah. And we hope to see you soon. Not just you, Chloe, but all the rest of you, that we hope to can see you at cons and other events in the future when such is possible. Until next time, well, you know what to do, folks. Valar, reread us.